Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Arnel Junio, so I am the vice chair. With me this evening, I have Paul Claudine, Stephen, Alan, and Sal. And we are joined by Mary Jo, Leslie, Jeff, and
Luis, I'm the
Luis.
Director of Programs with El Centro.
okay, thank you, Luis. And I'd like to welcome whoever else is online. I'm unable to see that at the moment, but welcome. Thank you for joining us. What we'd like to do first, and if you like, there is a copy of the agenda at the end of the table in front of Jeff. If you'd like to get one, feel free to do so. And I will now ask Mary Jo to do the call to order.
So, Crystal Cancino absent, so, Vice Chair Junio,
Here.
Commissioner Delgadillo.
Here.
Commissioner Yi,
Here.
Commissioner Hobson Cord,
Here.
Commissioner Perez,
Here.
and Commissioner Sanders running late.
Thank you. And we'll now have the reading of the land acknowledgement by Alan.
We want to acknowledge that we gather in San Mateo County on the traditional land of the Ohlone peoples, past and present, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. We honor and respect the Ohlone people's long history here that reaches beyond European colonization. We honor and respect the indigenous people who lived and continue to live upon this territory and whose practices and spiritualities are tied to the land and its other inhabitants today.
Thank you, Alan. And we will now review the agenda. If there's something you'd like to add or revise, feel free to comment. I have none. Looking around, saying no, nothing. Okay, so we will leave the agenda as it is. Do we have any comments from the public, or do we have anyone online from the public?
Just for clarification, I believe that because we're now in person, it's no longer, we have an internal Zoom for staff.
Okay,
The fact to record this meeting and to have Amy be on, but all of our commissions for citywide are all in person, with the exception of planning commission.
Interesting. So hybrid's not available?
No, it's not, and it's a state mandate.
Oh, that's weird.
But they're re-looking at that
Yeah.
because we do believe that it opens it up more to have more public participation, to make it more easy for people to participate in the government process, but we have to follow the state mandates, and that started, I believe, March 1st.
Interesting. Yeah. To your point of accessibility. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're looking at that, and legislators are re-looking at their legislation because people are pushing back on it.
okay, thank you, Leslie. I was not unaware of that. All right, okay. And so we'll move on to the agenda. We have the approval of the minutes from our last meeting from February 21st, 2023. I presume we all had the opportunity to review those when Mary Jo emailed it to us. Were there any corrections, amendments that you feel that's necessary? None? Okay.
That's good.
Then I believe, if I remember correct, we'll have a motion to approve those minutes. Is that correct? Do I have a motion? Paul Claudine, your motion to approve it. Do I have a second?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. See, okay, so we'll do a vote, vote, I guess what they call. Yeah, that's fine. I know you're thinking.
So, Vice Chair Junio,
Aye, sorry.
Commissioner Delgadillo,
Aye.
Commissioner Yi,
Aye.
Commissioner Hobson Cord,
Aye.
Commissioner Perez.
Aye.
All right. So the minutes are approved as is. Thank you. And we will now have our presentation from Jeff.
Okay. You guys want me to go up there or you want me to do it from here? What works for you? Comfortable for you?
If you could come up here, that'd be
Okay.
great. Thank you, Jeff.
That way I can see the screen too.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna.
And I think Mary Jo, you'll be able to assist Jeff, like, okay, thank
On
you.
this side, get better.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jeff Essex. I'm with El Centro de Libertad. I'm the executive director. And I'm here today to talk about the CARES program, the crisis assistance response, and I'm slurring my words already, and I don't know why. I didn't even have a lot of coffee. Crisis assistance response and evaluation services. We launched CARES in the city of Half Moon Bay in March of last year. We just celebrated last week our 1-year anniversary. It's a partnership between El Centro and the city of Half Moon Bay, with substantial funding coming in from the county of San Mateo, and also some funding coming in from Department of Healthcare Services out of Sacramento. Next slide. So what is the CARES program? It's an alternative for dispatching and responding to calls involving a mental health crisis. We're redirecting calls away from law enforcement as much as possible, and also other traditional first responders like fire and medical. And we're also providing additional support to law enforcement and fire and medical when they have to go to a call. Our main job is not to provide treatment. We're not going out there to provide therapy for folks. We're looking to de-escalate a situation. We're looking to stabilize that situation. And then we're looking to start the follow-up process to connect them to resources within the community, within the county, to provide that long-term stabilization and mental health care so that we don't have to keep going back to the same residents over and over again. Next slide. The primary point of it is to minimize the law enforcement contact with mental health related calls. A majority of mental health related calls do not require an armed response. They just don't. And we've seen it across the country. It's well evidence-based that when you don't have law enforcement showing up to somebody that's in a mental health crisis, it is easier to de-escalate and stabilize the situation, because the folks that do arrive, civilians, aren't seen as a threat. They're not a threat to their civil liberties. They're not there to arrest them. We're not packing guns. We're not packing badges. We're there to help. That's all we're there to do. We're looking to divert folks away from the criminal justice system. We're also looking to interrupt the cycle of mental health crisis within a family. CARES is the child of a movement that happened in the city of Half Moon Bay. About 10 years ago, a young lady by the name of Yanira Serrano, 18 years old, was shot and killed by deputies in the Moonridge community of Half Moon Bay. It's a farm working community. This was a young lady who the deputies had been out to their home numerous times before. But this one particular night, the deputies arrived there. She apparently had a knife with her, and they ended up shooting and killing her. And she was just 18 years old. That was about 10 years ago. That started a movement within the city of Half Moon Bay, and particularly the farm worker and Spanish-speaking community, saying enough is enough. 2 years ago, or about 3 years ago now, Sandra Harmon was also shot and killed by deputies in the city of Half Moon Bay. In both of those cases, we're not going back and we're not second guessing what law enforcement did. But we do know that in both of those cases, there were numerous calls involving those individuals with law enforcement leading up to those unfortunate nights. And we're advocating and we're saying, and the evidence is showing, that this type of civilian response may have prevented those 2 nights from happening, because we may have been able to connect those 2 folks to long-term stabilization and treatment without law enforcement having to be involved at all. So we're looking to interrupt that cycle within a family, and we're also looking to lower the cost associated with emergency mental health care. Just the diesel fuel alone on a traditional response of a fire truck, an ambulance, 2 police cars clogging up a street, just the cost of the fuel alone is expensive. You start factoring in the time and the labor involved by the professional personnel, the hospital expenses, the ambulance transports, the follow-up care. It's incredibly expensive when you respond to just one of these mental health related calls. It's much less expensive if we can get a couple of civilians out there to start the follow-up process and the connection to other stabilization services. Next slide. So what is the CARES team? It's 2 crisis intervention specialists. They receive specialized training and they have specialized experience. When we started the CARES program, El Centro de Libertad, we do outpatient drug and alcohol co-occurring disorder treatment in San Mateo County, both on the coast side and down in the South County area. We also do prevention education in the schools. We do anger management. We do domestic violence training for folks going through the courts. We do parenting classes. We do a variety of different things. During COVID, we were doing a bunch of COVID-19 outreach, PPE distribution, vaccine registrations, things like that. But this was something brand new to us. And we thought, if not us, who? If not us, who is actually going to start this movement within the county? So we took a look at our folks and we selected people from our existing counselor corps that had specialized experience in de-escalation, crisis management, suicide prevention. All of the folks are trained in motivational interviewing. If those of you who aren't aware of what motivational interviewing is, it's a very specific technique on the way that we talk with our clients. A lot of open-ended questions, a lot of affirmations, a lot of summaries, a lot of meeting them where they're at and making them a collaborative partner in the process of the game plan going forward. It's how we get 100% buy-in from the clients. If we tell people stop doing that and you shouldn't be doing that, well, they've been told that their entire life and they're now our clients. So why not make them a part of the plan so that we get the buy-in? Yes.
Again, what's the term?
Motivational interviewing. Call it MI for short. It's been around for a while. They started it in the medical field. My wife uses it on me every weekend. Time to do the chore list, I was like, I agree, honey, that's a good idea. So they receive extensive training. One or both are bilingual. One or both either have EMT certification or they have basic life support certification through the American Red Cross. It's a notch above basic CPR and first aid. It's essentially BLS certification is what law enforcement gets. That's what most police officers have, but it doesn't quite rise to the level of EMT certification. Our lead for the CARES program on the coast side, Kara, she's a state certified EMT. And when we first rolled out the CARES program, we thought we need to have a crisis intervention specialist and an EMT because we're really not creating anything new. We're copying the CAHOOTS program up in Eugene, Oregon, who for 30 years has been doing this. But what we found that we didn't really need that EMT certification because the county EMS has a great contract with AMR. They do a great job, and we had never come across an incident where we needed somebody with EMT level experience. If it was a medical emergency of that type, we would escalate the call to paramedics to come on out. So by eliminating that EMT specific requirement on the team, it made hiring folks a lot easier. Youngsters that are going to school to become an EMT, they're adrenaline junkies. They want the lights, the sirens, they want the action, they want the racing from call to call. That's not what CARES is. That's not what it is. So by training all of the crisis intervention specialists in BLS certification with oversight by the EMT, we're getting what we need inside the van. And here's the part that I lean on the most. One or both having some type of lived experience. The majority of the people that work for El Centro de Libertad, we got it past. We've been homeless. We have substance use issues and we're on the back end of that. We've had mental illness and we're on the back end of that. Some of us have done time and we're now on the back end of that. And we want that lived experience because when we go to a call, we're not showing up scared. We're not showing up in fear. We may not know that individual's specific individual experience, but we're familiar with it because we've been there, done that, and now we're on the back end. And what's key about that is when you have staff working for you with lived experience, they bring to the table something that you can't educate into somebody, and that is empathy and a passion for the job. They're not there for a check. I promise, I don't pay them enough. They're there because they really give a damn. So those are some of the requirements to be on the CARES team. All of the CARES programming is supervised by our full-time clinical director, Chevelle Burden. She's a licensed LCSW and carries two drug and alcohol certifications for the state. She's also an educator. She works for us full-time. She does weekly supervisions with the team. She provides training. They do process groups because we want to make sure that the team has proper mental health to go out and provide good care for the people on the coast side. Next slide. So how does CARES get called, or how do we get dispatched? A member of the community is going to call 911 or they're going to call 988 next. And the call screener is looking for three things to be absent. No weapons. If somebody's got a machete and they're swinging it around, or a gun, please send police. That's not my folks that should be going out to that. No medical emergency. If somebody is not responsive, please send fire and medical. And no crime. If there's domestic violence happening, if there's child abuse happening, if somebody's being assaulted, we will go and we'll support law enforcement, but law enforcement needs to take point on that because there's actually a crime happening. If those three things are missing, then the call is going to be sent over to CARES. If it comes in on 911, Public Safety Communication in Redwood City is going to call us out over the radio. County CARES 1, we have a call at this location. This is the nature of it. This is who you're going to contact. CARES 1, we copy Warren Ruth, the deputies in the field in Half Moon Bay that provide the primary law enforcement services for the coast side. They're hearing it. They know where we're going. And they're going to ask, do you need us to support? We'll advise. And once we arrive at the scene, we got about a 3 to 4 minute window to either report we're code 4, no further assistance needed, or we're going to back off and let you guys take point on this. There's been over the last year 3 times when we needed to back away because the call was more than what we knew when we initially got dispatched. If the folks call 988, the 988 call center run by Star Vista for this region, great organization. We work closely with them. They screen for the same types of things. And if they're not able to de-escalate the call over the phone and provide connections over the phone, if that's something that requires an in-person visit and those 3 things are missing, they're going to direct that call to the CARES team directly. We also get a lot of calls from citizens directly to the CARES team. And if we have to go out to a residence or a business, we get a call from the manager of the 7-Eleven. He says, I got a guy in front and he's talking to himself, and no, he's not violent, but he's making my customers nervous. We'll go out there and we'll have a chat with that person to find out, what do you need? What's going on? How can we help you? We'll call that in over the radio so the deputies know exactly where we're going and when we get there. And it's important for that because the deputies may have information that we don't have. They may know of prior gun issues at a home, or they may know of somebody that tends to lash out violently at unarmed people. So we want them to be aware where we're at so that they, when we have to call for help, they know that where we're at. Next bullet point. CARES keeps dispatch involved. Okay, so what happens when we arrive? Next. We do a scene assessment. We want to make sure that it's an appropriate CARES call. So we're going to arrive and we're going to make sure no guns, no medical emergency, no crime happening. I'm talking about serious crime. If we pull up and somebody's got a meth pipe or a bag of dope, that's still a CARES call. It doesn't necessarily involve law enforcement. If somebody's under the influence of alcohol or drugs, but they're manageable, and we're able to communicate with them, that may not require a law enforcement response. So we're looking to make sure that this is a call that's appropriate for us and that it's safe for us to be at. Next one. And we're immediately starting de-escalation and assessment of scene stabilization. We're going to want to find out what's going on for that person right now. A lot of cases, we've met these people before. So we have some history and we kind of know what their deal is. And we've already established somewhat of a rapport. We never give up on somebody. If we show up and somebody says, you know what, I don't need to talk to you guys today, kick rocks, we'll leave because we're not there to force ourselves on them. But we've started building a rapport. The next time we have to go see that person, they may say, yeah, you know what, let's talk. And we carry bottles of water and snacks, chips, nutrition bars on board. I think we even got a pack of cigarettes in the glove box in case they need one of those. You know, we start building that rapport with them. We start using that motivational interviewing, and we start a plan of action, and we start talking about referrals and safety plans. If somebody is feeling like they might want to hurt themselves, or they're feeling very despondent, we're going to go to a safety plan. What are the things we can do to keep you safe tonight? Do you feel like you can be alone? Who do we need to call to connect you with, to be with you tonight? We're going to talk about what types of services that they may need. You know, what's going on for them? Are they dealing with a death? Are they dealing with substance abuse? Are they dealing with a mental illness? Are they dealing with homelessness, food insecurity, financial insecurity? What's happening that we can start looking at who we can connect you to in the community? Next. If somebody isn't able to, we do a lot of transports, by the way. We'll transport them to an appointment. We'll take them over to a doctor's office. We've transported people to the pharmacy so that they can pick up their psych med prescription. During the storms, you know, Half Moon Bay got slammed. People needed to find a dry place to stay. So we were doing a lot of transports over the hill to get them to dry shelters. And we're also able to do voluntary 5150 holds. So 5150 Welfare and Institutions Code, that's a 72-hour detention that we can place on somebody if they're a risk to themselves or other people. Traditionally, that's used by law enforcement to do an involuntary 5150 hold. We have found that probably 70%, and that's not a hard number, that's just a good guess. About 70% of the time that people are 5150, they know they need the help. They know they want the help, and they want the help right away. So if we've got somebody like that says, I can't be alone tonight, I need help tonight, we'll talk to them about what a 5150 hold is. We'll tell them, we can get you over to psychiatric emergency tonight. They'll get you immediate care tonight. You could lose your freedom for 72 hours. It's something to think about. Are you comfortable going down that road? And if they say yes, our licensed LCSW is able to facilitate a 5150 hold, and we'll put them into our CARES vehicle without handcuffs, without a cage, without 4-point restraints, without fire trucks, ambulances, and police cars clogging up the street, making a big old show and an embarrassment for the person that called 911 for help. And we'll transport them over to psychiatric emergency. We'll do the warm handoff. We'll get them checked in. If we come across somebody that we know can't be left alone and they are resistant, then we may need to get more assertive with it. And that's where our relationship with law enforcement comes in. We're able to ask them to come over, and we're able to collaborate with them and make it not so much of a traumatic experience for the person that needs to get help that night. Next slide. So right now we operate 8 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. The entire mid-coast of San Mateo County, from the Tom Lantos tunnels all the way down to the South County line. We originally started this program on a $75,000 budget from the city of Half Moon Bay. That's what Matthew came to me with and said, this is what I got to spend, what can you do? And I said, not much, but we'll try and figure out something. So we came up with a 4-month pilot. Then the Board of Supervisors, District 3, I think it was Don Horsley at the time, came in and said, let me match that money. Okay, cool, we can make it a longer pilot. And we started with just 2 crisis intervention specialists. We already had a van. It was a 2002 Town and Country on life support, but it just needed to be painted and logoed up. And so we threw together a little pilot, you know, for what it was worth. Then the state of California, through Department of Healthcare Services, came in and they said, we're going to give you another $180,000. Okay, cool. Now we're talking. Now we got some money to play with. So we extended that pilot out to a year, and we decided to make it 2 teams. So instead of 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, we're now operating 7 days a week, 10 hours a day. The teams are on 4-10 schedules, meaning 4 days, 10-hour days. And we also expanded outside of the city limits of Half Moon Bay. We were getting a lot of requests for help from Moss Beach, Montera, El Granada, La Honda, Pescadero, from the deputies that were hearing the CARES team respond to calls in Half Moon Bay, and they wanted it too. They wanted that kind of support. So the city of Half Moon Bay said, sure, let's do it coast sidewide. So, all told, between the city of Half Moon Bay and the other coast side communities, we're talking maybe serving a population a little over 30,000 people. You guys got over twice that here in South San Francisco. And we're going to go anywhere we need to go: homes, businesses, schools, shelters, homeless encampments, anywhere, with anybody, juveniles, adults. We don't care. If somebody needs help, we're going to be there. We originally designed the hours to be like a swing shift from like 1 o'clock to 10 o'clock or something like that. But the folks on the coast side, they go to bed early, man. The only thing that happens after 6 p.m. on the coast are bar fights and drunk drivers. Nothing that CARES should be going to. We were missing a lot of mental health crisis calls at the schools from the early morning hours. So we shifted our hours down, we made the hours longer, and we're now capturing many, many more calls. Next slide. What happens after a response? We do warm handoffs and referrals. We have wonderful working relationships with our community-based organizations on the coast side, as well as our county partners at BHRS, with the Adult Protective Services, Child Protective Services, the VA, Legal Aid, Cora, just a number of agencies across the county that we're constantly doing referrals and connections to. We don't just call it one and done at night. We don't do that, because folks that are really struggling with mental health issues, sometimes just picking up the phone and dialing a number that we gave them is a barrier. So we're going to check on them the next day. We're going to call them up, or we're going to say, you mind if we stop by tomorrow to see how you're doing? And we'll check in. Did you make that call yet? You want us to make that call right now with you? Do you want us to take you over to the Coastside Clinic so that we can do a warm handoff? Did you run into any unnecessary BS when you made the call? Like they didn't want to help you? Let's get that taken care of and out of the way. We need to get you connected. So that's what we're going to do. Once the connection's made, then we're done with it. And it is now the agency that we've referred them to, or agencies that we've referred them to. Next. Oh, wait, go back. Okay. We do next day. We're also looking at the entire family. If we go into a home and it's a juvenile that is struggling, it's not just the juvenile that's struggling, it's the entire family. Everybody is experiencing trauma there. So what does that family need? Is there food insecurity? Is there employment issues? Are there issues with the utility? How do we get them connected to those agencies that's going to help them and to provide them the support that they need so that they can provide the support to the person that's in crisis? And we make sure that the connections are made. Now I'm ready for the next slide. From March 16th of last year when we launched until January 31st of this year, we had responded to 280 calls. Those numbers have been updated. We're now up over 320 calls for service. We've done a number of 40 transports, 213 engagements. And basically that's the number of calls minus the number of people that refuse to even talk to us. Because sometimes that happens. We'll go see somebody and they'll, I don't want to talk to you guys. I'm fine, leave me alone. Okay, that's a refusal. I get it. But of the 213 engagements, 179 of those were successful stabilizations. That's an 87% success rate. So what does that mean? It means nobody went to jail. It means nobody went to the hospital. It means nobody picked up a criminal case. It means those folks were left in better condition than when we found them. And it means that we've started the follow-up and the connection process for them. They're now involved in the process of their own stabilization and long-term care. We've done 360 follow-up actions. Those are the follow-up visits the next day. Those are the phone calls. Those are the getting them to an appointment. Those are calling and collaborating with other agencies that they may already be attached to make sure that this homeless person is getting their psych meds because they're hurting themselves without it. It's all those follow-up actions that we do. And here's the part I'm most proud of: 8.5 minutes from the time we get the call to the time that we arrive at the scene. 8.5 minutes. The cops love us for that. You can't even get a tow truck that quick. We are there. We are there. And it doesn't matter. That's our average response time on a month-to-month basis. It doesn't waver a whole lot. And that includes a couple of extended arrival times when we have to drive up to La Honda, especially when the roads are all washed out because of atmospheric river after atmospheric river. 8.5 minutes is our average response time. We carry the radios, we have earpieces, we have our civilian clothing, but we do have CARES shirts and polos and warm weather gear, and we're listening. If a call goes to the deputies, but it sounds like something we can assist with, we'll ask the deputy, do you mind if we tag along? They'll say, no, come on, I can use you. Next slide. So some of the successes, the law enforcement collaborations, I was talking about this before the meeting started. We weren't sure what to expect. The sheriff's department at the time that we rolled out CARES was under a different sheriff who was resistant to the CARES program. So we weren't sure what the reception would be with the deputies in the field. We could not have been more wrong. They were amazing. They loved it. We were 2 weeks into this deal, excuse me. And our folks were coming back from over the hill after doing a transport, driving down Highway 92, headed into San Mateo, into Half Moon Bay. And they came across a guy walking down the middle of the road on the highway, dark clothing at night. So the guy on the radio, they told the dispatcher, we got a guy walking down the middle of the road. We're going to see if he's okay. So we pulled over and we made contact with him. It was a gentleman that had a meth issue, but he was just trying to get to his parents' house in Half Moon Bay to a safe location. The deputies arrived because they heard the call go out over the radio. So one of our CARES team members walked over to the deputies and said, this is the deal. I think we're good with just transporting him over to his parents' house and getting him off the street. And the deputy said, awesome. They turned around and we overheard one tell the other one, man, I can get used to this. They love us out there. Recruiting mental health professionals. When we first rolled out the CARES team, I had to beat my staff off away from me. Everybody wanted to be in the CARES van because it was something that was so different and so unique and so awesome. And we don't have problems finding folks to fill the spots. We're not looking for licensed clinicians. We're following the CAHOOTS model. We're looking for people with lived experience that have very specific experience professionally and training professionally. Some education, but you don't need to be a licensed professional. You do need to be registered and certified with the state of California as a drug and alcohol co-occurring disorder counselor. And you have to have some time on the job with some very experience or some very specific experience around de-escalation and crisis management. The community support has just been tremendous, just tremendous. And we are known as the Swiss Army knife of Half Moon Bay. January 23rd, we all know what happened, what went down out in Half Moon Bay. 7 people got killed. And the community rallied around the farm working folks there because their homes were crime scenes, the farms that they lived on. So we had to find a place for them to stay. So we had a loss organization. We had Coastside Hope. We had the American Red Cross that had these great refugee centers set up for people to be placed into hotels and things like that until their crime scene was done being processed. There was one victim of that wasn't able to take advantage of those locations, and that was the family of the shooter, because the community was mad. So we can't take them over to the Alas Center to get food. And the sheriff's department reached out and they said, we need you guys to do something out of the box, and that is provide support to the shooter's wife and family. So they brought them over to our offices in Half Moon Bay. We went into lockdown mode. They spoke absolutely no English at all. So we arranged to get some Mandarin translators brought in rather than do it over the phone. The mom or the wife She had been with the deputies all night long. The deputies had not told her what happened. They were more interested in getting information out of her leading up to the events of that night. So she had no idea 7 people were dead. She thought her husband was just in trouble for being in a fight. And she kept insisting that she wanted to go home. And we kept telling her, you can't, it's not safe for you. We don't even want you leaving our offices. It's not safe. The press is everywhere. The community is everywhere. And we had to be the ones to tell her what happened. So we sat with her, we processed that with her. She understood then that she couldn't go back to her home that day. She had no cell phone, no communication, no family here in the United States. Everybody was in China. And they had back-to-back Asian shootings in California. That makes big press in China. So her family in China was seeing dad's picture all over the news, couldn't get a hold of mom because the police had her cell phone, had everything. So we got her set up with another phone with an international calling plan. We got her set up to download the app that she used to communicate with her family in China. We made that connection happen so she was able to connect with her family there. We got her set up with new clothing, new toiletries, reading material in Chinese. We got her some food. We got her set up in a hotel on the other side of the hill outside of the community until we could hand the process off to HSA. But that was the flexibility and the utility of the CARES program that was needed at the time. So I'm really proud of our services that we were able to provide, even though it was done very clandestinely and very under cover of darkness. Next slide. That's me. Who's got questions?
Thank you. That was
Yes.
quite informative. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I just had a quick question. So how do, schools and 7-Eleven owners know to contact CARES? How long did it take for CARES to become known?
It took a while. It took probably 2 to 3 months in the process before people started seeing us enough. The schools we did a lot of networking and marketing of the CARES program to various different organizations, the Mid-Coast Community Council, the business associations. And then when people started seeing it show up, they wanted to know more. And like the 7-Eleven would say, well, I really don't like calling 911 for this guy. Okay, here's our number. You can call us directly. These are the hours that we operate. If it's outside of those hours, you got to call, 911 if there's a real issue there. But you can call us directly. It took a while for the word to get out. Now we get calls regularly from the public library, from the schools, from the 7-Elevens, from the Shell gas stations, from Alas, from Abundant Grace, all these other community partners that we work with that work with the homeless population that encounter mental illness on a regular basis.
Jeff, first of all, thank you. You shared a lot. I have loads of questions. I also want to respect time. How much time do we have for this for Q&A roughly? What do you sense?
I'm not gonna put a time limit on it, but I think we're good. So go.
I got all night.
Oh, that can talk real slow then.
Yeah.
All right. Actually, I'm not sure who's controlling the deck. Can we roll up to the deck?
That would be Mary Jo.
Okay, great.
I'm going to grab my water, but please ask your question.
Actually, one of the things I do, I wanted to share my appreciation, first of all, is among a few things, it's the very holistic, holistic process, going right down, including the families and that perspective. So that I just want to say I do respect that a lot. I appreciate how you calculated that in different moments and different examples, especially with the extremely difficult event on the January 23rd.
Yeah.
That's extremely difficult, especially I'm sure balancing with the community and how that immediate reaction was happening.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. And if I may just go, content. Yeah. Wait, hold on. You're going too fast. All right. CARES. Okay. That was the high level. Can we roll down to the next one? Okay. Just a few things here. I'm just gonna. I think maybe it's an evolution thing. at one point you said you take care of residents, but maybe at one point non-residents, but now it's more, you're more wide open now. Can you help me understand that?
Yes, if you're on the Central Coast, whether you live there or you're visiting there, you're our people. Whether you're homeless or whether you have a home, you're our people.
Oh, gotcha.
So it's wherever the call is, whoever's involved in that call, we're gonna take care of them. Regardless of legal status, whatever.
Okay, all right, great, great, thank you. The lived experience, right? I appreciate where that's coming from as well. Can you help me understand a little bit more so about the requirements of what it means to be an authentic lived experience that counts?
Boy, that is a really subjective question. You know, I mean, to come to work for El Centro de Libertad, you can't be on probation or parole or have any criminal cases right now.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm looking for 1 or 2 years that you're totally off paper. And in that 1 or 2 year period of time, there needs to be some significant professional and personal development that's happening. So if your cases were involving substance use, are you in recovery? Do you go to meetings on a regular basis? Are you active in your recovery process? And what are you doing with your time outside of that? Are you in school? Where have you worked currently? Where are you working now? So when we hire people, we're looking at work histories, we're looking at personal histories. One of the questions that I always ask my folks when Luis will screen the applicants if they're going to be working in his department, and he'll do the background check, and then he goes, I want to hire this person. And I'll say, okay, let me call him and I'll ask him the question. And the question is this: why do you want to work with El Centro de Libertad? Why? You know, most of us have lived experience. We've done time, we've had issues, we're now on the back end of that. Why do you want to work here? Why does it matter? And if you tell me it's because you want to help people, I'm going to hang up the phone. Who doesn't? I want to know what your reason is. Why is it important to you? And I always get the answer I'm looking for. My brother, my dad, me, and it's personal. That's the goal. Yes, I need to know about your college transcripts. I really don't care about that. I want to know why you want to work for us and why it matters to you.
Okay, appreciate it.
Question to the slide. Is BLS certification the minimal requirement? Because that's being an EMT and BLS that's it.
Big difference there.
Yeah.
We started out requiring that one of the people in the CARES vehicle be a state certified EMT, and we realized we didn't need that level of medical training on board the vehicle, because if it's a true medical emergency, paramedics and ambulances, AMR is already going to be showing up. The BLS certification, basic life support certification offered through the American Red Cross, is essentially the basic first aid, CPR, scene assessment, overdose assessment or risk and coordination, things like that. It's the same training that law enforcement receives when they hit the streets. So that's the certification that both the people in the van have to have. And then we have our CARES lead. Her name is Karen. She's been with the program from the start. She came to us as a state certified EMT, and then she does supplemental training with the entire teams. You know, how do you check somebody's vitals? How do you check for blood pressure? What does nystagmus look like in the eyes? How do you check a pulse rate? We do that not necessarily to do a medical assessment, while that's important, but when somebody is elevated emotionally, if you just say, do you mind if we slow things down so I can take your blood pressure real quick? That is a great de-escalation technique. So we want everybody to know how to do that. So Kara does supplemental training with the all the staff that's on the CARES teams.
Thanks.
That answer?
Okay.
No, I know you have
Yeah.
other questions.
And if I'm running the stream,
They'll
it's
probably-
okay.
they'll-
Interrupt the stream.
No.
Yeah.
I'm confident many of the questions that you'll present to Jeff is probably something we're already thinking. So
Fair enough.
go ahead, Sam.
Okay, no, thank you.
You're welcome.
Speak about allowing for interrupting. You were mentioning earlier, and you don't need to roll it back, but you were mentioning earlier one of the tenets is to interrupt the mental health cycle of the families. I think it's
The cycle of mental illness within a family.
right.
The way it's been handled for decades now is the police show up
Right.
and they'll either 5150 somebody, or they'll be assured that everything is calmed down, and then they're done because they need to go out and do the other things we need law enforcement to do.
Right.
They don't have the ability to do the follow-up care. They don't have the ability to spend the amount of time. A CARES call, we don't put a time limit on it. It could be 15 minutes or it could be 4 hours that we're sitting with that person and doing the stabilization or in the moment. And then we're not looking just to call it good once everything is settled down for the night. We're going to go back the next day and we're going to make sure that the referrals that we made those connections are being made. We're going to find out how they're feeling. You know, yesterday was a rough day for you. How are you doing today?
Right, I appreciate the clarification. So, and I don't mean to get overly philosophical and technical with my
No,
point,
go
my
for it.
point here. I know I think what I'm sensing from what you shared is really you're interrupting the classic cycle. And in the process of your organization's presence, activities, it's really redefining the process of mental health crisis, right?
Yes.
But redefining the approach, that's what so I'm just saying, if I may, is that fair to say?
It's totally fair to say.
Okay.
And the benefit of that process is sometimes if a parent has a juvenile that is having an episode again, they may not call 911, they may call us directly. You know, Johnny I think he's high. Or he's unlocked in his room. He won't let anybody in. Kara got along great with him last time. Can you guys come out? So we've already started a different approach for that family unit in dealing with that crisis. Just by interrupting it.
I may have missed, so I'm gonna apologize right off the bat, but are you housed with in the station, the deputy
No.
say? No,
We have our own suite of offices in Half Moon Bay.
okay,
We were there before doing drug and alcohol treatment services and prevention education and anger, all the other stuff that El Centro has been known for since 1994. So when we launched the CARES program, we just carved out part of that suite, made it the CARES offices. We're in the same complex as the substation for the deputies. So when we arrive to work, we have to walk across the street to the substation and
I know exactly.
check out the radios.
Yeah.
And then we have to call into public safety and say, we're about to go 10-8 on the radios. Okay, cool. And then at the end of the night, we turn the radios back over to the deputies. But that is as much ownership as the deputies have over the CARES program. It really is an independent entity. Now, that being said, we would not have the success that we've had over the last year if it wasn't for that that intense entwining of the sheriff's department and the CARES folks. It really is essential. They've come to trust us. We've come to trust them. And there have been times when they've shown up on a call when we didn't need them, and we've asked them to kind of, stand down. We got this. And they've let us do that. So they've let us into their domain to lighten their load, and it's worked out amazingly well. That took the reception from the deputies was great right out of the gate, but that level of trust and rapport, that took some partnership building. Same thing as it would be here in South San Francisco. You guys got your own PD. They have their own way of doing things. So it would be a couple, 3-4 months into the process before the South San Francisco Dispatch Center and the officers working in the field trusted us. And we're good with that. We're patient.
Will you keep responding to the same call to the same address? When is there?
Yes.
So
Absolutely. If we're not going to give up on anybody. And now, again, we're not law enforcement. We're not there to force ourselves onto anybody. If we show up and they go, I don't want you here. Well, somebody called asking for help. Well, it wasn't us. So you don't want us. Are you sure? Because we were here the other night and, we're going to try and convince them. We're going to try and work with them. You know, but if they refuse our services, it's a refused service. We'll radio it in. They didn't want to have anything to do with us. And that may present a different flow chart for the dispatchers to follow if they get another call from that place. But if the deputy or the officers get there and they say, okay, we're ready for the CARES team to come over and take over, we're there. We're never going to give up on somebody. There is a gentleman, it was a homeless gentleman in Half Moon Bay. I'll call him Sam, won't tell you his last name. Sam physically beat himself up in the face, like hard fists in the face. He had other behavior acting out. He was working with another agency within the county that was supposed to be providing medications. They either weren't making the effort or he was making an effort not to be found, but he was violently hurting himself. And we saw him on a daily basis. We were getting calls from him on a daily basis. We finally established a connection with his caseworker for the other agency. And when we weren't getting enough action out of them, I was able to elevate the call to BHRS, who funds the other agency. And all of a sudden things started happening. But we were able to get him connected with his monthly injections and his daily oral medications. And at some point, he needed to be 5150. And we were able to coordinate with the deputies to do that in a humane, dignified way and get him into psychiatric emergency safely. We weren't able to do it because he didn't want to. But it was not as traumatic as it would have been if the deputies had to throw him down and cuff him up.
Yeah.
It was much more humane. And he, since then, got into long-term residential care. He stopped beating himself up. He's stabilized. He still visits the coast every now and then to see his old buddies, but he's not hurting himself anymore. That took almost 8 months to get to that point with that one guy. We don't give up.
That's a good story.
So at the moment, you have 2 teams of 2 and a supervisor. I'm thinking there's 5 in this specialized unit.
There are 2 teams of 2 crisis intervention specialists. Kara is one of those.
Oh, Kara is one of them.
Yeah, and she oversees all the teams. Then we have a clinical director, full-time clinical director, who oversees everything that they do. Then we have Luis, who's over here on the wall. He's the director of program services for El Centro. He makes sure that there's continuity in the staffing. We can't not show up. You know, we can't be late to work. You know, if somebody is sick, it's Louis' job to find somebody else to get into that seat. And that may include Louis being in the van or the clinical director. They may have to call me to get into the van. All of us went through the same training that our folks are in the van are going through. In addition to that, El Centro has over 25 full-time staff. And we have about 5 that aren't on the CARES team that have shadowed the exact same training that the CARES team has. So we have a deep bench to draw from. And all of them Spanish speaking, because that's the predominant monolingual barrier on the coast side. For South San Francisco, we're talking about a PPI population, Spanish speaking. So we're different language barriers that we have to hire for, but we can do it.
I understand your point earlier about showing up without law enforcement, because that can be reactive. Totally get that. When might it actually make sense that when law enforcement is responding to something, that actually having your presence there or some nature of it actually would be helpful in and of itself? Does it make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. When you've got potential domestic violence situation, sometimes it's good to have law enforcement there to keep whoever the aggressor is in check and to keep the rest of the family safe.
Yes, I appreciate that. And maybe I can rephrase. If law enforcement is, when dispatch, it's like a law enforcement situation to go on and take care of. What I'm saying, what opportunities or options is there for you to still be a part of that, or for law enforcement to maybe have you be there at the scene, even though it's could be charged event.
Yep.
But still having the option of the likes of your services. That's what I'm saying.
There are plenty of calls. I don't have the stats with me right now, but I would say about 70% of our calls are true civilian response. Okay, where it's just us that go. About 30%, and again, don't hold me to those numbers. It's couple of points, one side or the other. About 30% are what we call co-responder models, which is like the CWCRT model, where they're going with law enforcement. So on those calls, both law enforcement and CARES will be dispatched, or law enforcement will be dispatched and they'll ask for CARES to come along, or CARES will hear the call, go out over the radio and say, we just chatted with that guy. So we'll get on the radio to the officer responding and say, hey, we met with him the other day. Mind if we tag along? They'll say, yes, please come on board.
Oh, so you do still have an ear of what's going on.
Oh, yeah.
Even though you may not be officially called on.
Oh, definitely.
Gotcha.
When the shootings happened, we knew about it as it was unfolding before it ever hit the press. And my people called me and they go, this is happening. And I said, just stay in the office. Stay safe. Excuse me. So, the officer will respond. They may get a call of a suspicious person or a disturbance that on the surface looks like it's a law enforcement matter. And we may tag ourselves, they may tag us, or they may arrive and realize that it is not a law enforcement matter, that it's a mental health crisis, and they'll tag us in at that point. So we do both. It's co-responder, it's civilian response. We always strive for civilian response, because anytime you can take the expensive equation of law enforcement and the risk involved when you introduce a weapon into a mental health scene, if you can eliminate that, you got a better shot. Good?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Have you ever responded to a situation where CARES responded first thinking that it was not something that, the police needed to be there, and then found that it was a dangerous situation and you had to hurry and call the police?
3 times we've had to elevate a call in the last year. 2 of them were for medical reasons. Person was, this is dangerous. We had to administer Narcan. Now it's time to get paramedics and everybody out of here. The other time was a law enforcement issue. And that was because somebody was about to get assaulted and they were not listening, and there was risk to somebody else at the time. Those have been the 3 times that we've had to elevate a call that was originally given to us as just a CARES call. Yeah. And the deputies were great. They were right there.
I could see where the lived experience comes into play there.
It really matters.
Yeah.
It really matters. And I don't say this to disparage law enforcement at all. I really don't. I used to be law enforcement. I was an officer in Oakland for 6 years. And the hiring pool for police is no criminal background, college educated, middle-class white kid from the suburbs. Let's hire as many of those as we can, because they're going to pass the background check and the psychological exam. And then let's put a gun and a badge on them and let's put them out into a community of color that they may be completely unfamiliar with. That alone is scary enough. Throw in a mental health crisis into the mix, and you can train them as much as you can. But if you can have somebody go there that is comfortable walking into that setting, because we used to live there, it makes it a lot easier.
Street creds, basically. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. With the rapport, that rapport that you mentioned, that's really crucial. And it really breaks down barriers, especially when you gain conversations over time. As your program has grown, right, and had different people coming in, help me understand the process of having that seamless rapport, regardless of who shows up and what little the person may or may not know, even for especially maybe a repeat.
Okay. So we got 2 different teams, and working a 4-10 schedule on Wednesdays, they fully overlap. Those are our supervision, our training, our briefing days, our heavy follow-up days, because we got one team to respond, another team to do some intensive follow-up for some lingering issues that might be lingering. But the beauty of having those 2 teams work so closely together out of the same office is there's a lot of communication. It's only 30,000 people. And of that, a small fraction are the folks that we're responding to. So it's not a ton of people on the coast side. So both teams have had regular contact with them. We developed as part of the CARES rollout, an actual CARES database where we generate an incident report for every call we go on. And that incident report has follow-up tabs for every follow-up action that we do. And those reports are detailed and lengthy. So there's a lot of report writing that they do. We do that for internal purposes. If the sheriff's department needs a copy of a report, because it's an issue that needs to go to the county PERT team or to deputies in the field, we're gonna print it out. We're gonna give them a copy of that report. But those reports are essential. And when a CARES team starts a week and they're gonna go back and they're gonna look over the calls from the week leading up, those days that they've been off, so they can become familiar with what's been going on.
Just curious, is that a homegrown kind of system or is that like a vendor provided type of?
You know, I used to have a CFO, Colin. And this guy loved to build technical stuff. And he says, I can build a database for that. And I said, okay, because I'm thinking spreadsheets. We're on a fixed budget.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
where I'm thinking paper charts and he go, I could build it. And he actually built it. It's a Microsoft Office suite thing. And it's got a mobile app on it. You know, I can look at any point to see what's going on with the team in the field. He built this thing. So we own it.
Microsoft.
It's Microsoft software, but we built the database. It's, you know, he has since left. We've got a new director of finance now who, while he's capable, I think we have our IT vendor who is now trying to dissect how we built it so that they can service it. But it's worked great for us. And it's what I use every month to generate my statistical reports from. It's a great tool. It's funny, Matthew Chittister, the city manager for Half Moon Bay, and I went out to CIT International Convention in Pittsburgh last August. CIT is Crisis Intervention Training. CIT International is the gold standard body that oversees all the training for law enforcement, across Canada, Mexico, and the United States on responding to mental health calls. So we went out to this convention and we presented the CARES program to them. And there's various different versions of this. There's a lot of co-responder models. There's a lot of follow-up care models. There's a lot of CIT training, law enforcement program models. But the reception for the CARES program was incredible. One, because we were able to do it so cheaply. And two, because of our success. But three, we had a playbook. Even the Cahoots program didn't have an operations manual after 30 years of doing this.
Really?
They didn't. I thought we got to have a manual. So we wrote an operations manual on how to run a CARES program.
An SOP.
Yeah,
Huh.
we developed a database. So I've gotten calls still to this day, and Matthew gets them every day as well, and emails, people asking for our materials. How did you do it? Can we have your playbook? Would you share with us your database? If you're not in San Mateo County, I'll share whatever you want. If you're in San Mateo County, you gotta come talk to me. But yeah, we've shared it to Rhode Island, to North Carolina, Northern California, Southern California, Fremont. A lot of different agencies have asked for our material and how we did what we did.
Yeah,
I just say, that's cool you to share, that's all.
no, I was gonna eventually get to this one because I'm kind of, not even kind of, I'm in awe with the little funding you got, how much success and how much you've been able to do.
It was a passion project, not just for Matthew, but for me personally. It really was like, this is a career high. I can retire after this because it's never going to get this good again, And like I said, we started with an old hoopty van that El Centro already owned. We were able to go to Don Horsley's office and ask him for 30 grand. So we bought the new shiny CARES van with that money through Enterprise Car Rental, and it's done a great job for us. We started out small. We had just the one team, and they were doing just the 8-hour shifts, and we were just in the city of Half Moon Bay. And then it just kind of morphed and grew from there and additional funding came in. Now there's AB 118 that Newsom signed into law last year, I think it was, that authorizes specific states funding at a minimum of $250,000 annually for 6 years for programs specifically like this, for municipalities to secure this funding and to specifically hire CBOs to run these types of programs across the state. So that funding stream should be opening up here in the next month or so.
What assembly bill was that again?
AB 118,
118.
yes,
Thank you.
yeah. They've had some issues developing how they're going to do the RFP. In fact, Tony Serrano, Yanira Serrano's brother, who had to call the police the night that she was killed, was on the state panel that helped develop the RFP requirements for AB 118. He's been a great advocate for not just the CARES program, but for this type of model.
If I may make a comment, you know, when you mentioned about an all, actually, that's what I've been most curious about. What actually all means is these other numbers that we heard. To me, that's nuts. Because of where we are in the process. Right?
Yeah.
So I'm coming from the startup, right? The scrappy, you know, being very clear on where your motivations are coming from and being very astute and efficient with and being creative with what you have. So that's very cool. And actually, that's kind of that's the spirit that I appreciate.
You know, you want to know what it means for South San Francisco? You guys want to talk about money?
Eventually.
I can pitch you some soft numbers. Don't hold me to them. But we're talking about probably $500,000 annually.
That makes more sense to me.
You know, and it would be from the first year, that would include startup expenses. You know, securing a vehicle, maybe 2, securing office space, or determining how we're going to share office space, the ramp up, the hiring, the training, and then $500,000 annually after that, ballpark.
Yeah, I appreciate that gut thought. Yeah, that's cool.
You mentioned earlier that,
And you could share that expense with the city of Pacifica since you guys already share a radio network.
Yeah, you're familiar with that, yeah.
Go ahead.
you mentioned earlier that, law enforcement, there's a conference consortium, maybe of Canada, US and
Oh,
Mexico.
PIP International. Yeah.
Have you incorporated any of what they do or and vice versa into?
When we first got ready to develop the CARES program, we had to make sure that our people had the same training that law enforcement have. So we're talking the same language when we're working with them in the field. So we wanted to get the CIT training that the deputies got. They wouldn't let us into their training because we weren't county employees. So my clinical director reached out to CIT International and I sent her out to Utah, Salt Lake City, Utah for a week to get train the trainer certified in the CIT International 40-week curriculum, the same training that the county trainers had that were delivering it to law enforcement. So El Centro has expandability in that I've got a CIT facilitator that trains our staff in CIT International policies and procedures and systems and modalities.
I love it. Thank you. I love your point as well. And maybe going off with, or not going off, but rolling with that. We've been talking so far, a lot of upsides, a lot of cool. What are some things that, man, when you look back, gosh, that when you're super frustrated, like, oh, we messed up.
Don't say that. We haven't had that yet.
Oh, okay.
There were a lot of things that we were nervous about.
Right.
Especially my board of directors. They thought I was insane when I came to them with this idea that we're going to be going to 911 calls instead of the police. They said, you're high. And trust me, it's going to work. One of the biggest concerns was liability issues. You know, so we had to talk to our insurance broker and tell them this is what we're planning to do. What kind of insurance do we need? Workers' comp, liability. We don't want to, we don't want to go bankrupt if we get sued. So what kind of insurance coverage do we need? So we had to bump up our insurance a bit. You know, we had to take a look. We had to work with public safety communications because for decades, they have been developing a playbook and working with flow charts that are designed to do one thing, and that is to limit liability to the county. Secondary effect, hopefully, is helping the people in the community. But the first thing is to limit the liability. And that means somebody calls 911, you send everybody, we're not in trouble. That's what we're trying to avoid. So we had to work with them. We had to do some outreach to Phoenix, Arizona, who have actually had the legal challenges of what happens if you don't send police, fire, and medical to a mental health related call. Come to find out that if the dispatcher says, we'd like to send civilian crisis intervention specialists to work with you, are you good with that? And they say, yes, there is no liability to the county. So we've navigated a lot of these things, but we haven't had anything yet jump off to where, holy crap, we screwed up.
And I
It
didn't mean
hasn't
to
happened yet.
well, I didn't mean to go like the superstitious.
And I'm waiting for it to happen, you know, at some point, something's gonna go wrong, and we'll deal with it,
Right.
you know, but we're doing the right thing, and we're doing it for the right reason.
Coming from the right
And we're doing it the right way, so, you know, hopefully.
I got one other question, hopefully this is not off base or out left field. What did you think when you heard the news that our governor is going to turn San Quentin into a rehabilitation mental health type facility versus the hardcore?
Are you asking for my personal opinion?
Sure.
I'm not sure I want to give it.
How do you think it'll impact CARES?
I don't think it'll have any impact on CARES.
Okay.
I think that type of service will be great for folks re-entering the population. I think the criminal justice reform in California was well intentioned, but I think there are some things that didn't get done right with it. And now we're seeing a level of street level crime that is indicative of a mass release for folks that just aren't ready to be released yet, or don't have the support and the education and the training that they need to be released yet. So I think the intention of doing it is the right move. And if it's San Quentin, okay. Yeah. I hope that answered your question.
Yes.
It's been very light. It was very good.
Yes.
That's the answer.
Actually, if I may bring maybe the point of leadership a little bit closer to what you had shared, I just want to understand a little bit more. So you mentioned at one point, I think at some early stage of the program, you had how you refer to a resistant sheriff.
Yeah.
And then there were supportive deputies. And so help connect me, what about that leadership? Was there a change perspective, or was it literally a change of leadership that it was actually much more supportive system-wide? Did I miss something?
No, the support from the deputies was immediate. The trust and the partnership with the deputies and the supervisory staff and the co-side captain, all of that took, a couple, 3 months to really kind of get us in sync and working in a rhythm. The resistance from the sheriff's department came from the sheriff himself and his immediate command staff. And because the public safety communications was the agency that we started working with before we talked to anybody else, because we knew we had to have 911 on board with this program. We had talked about having a different phone number that people will call, and the immediate thought that came up to that was, who knows what 211 is? Been around for over 20 years. Not too many people know. So why are we going to try and educate people on a new 9-digit phone number? If somebody needs help, if they're in a crisis, they know from childhood, dial 911. Even the ones that are resistant to call 911 know to call 911. And now 988. So we had to get public safety communication on board really early on in the process. They loved the idea, but even with them, their upper echelon management was like, yes, let's do this. But the actual call takers and the actual dispatcher were very worried about not getting in trouble and not following the flow charts that have been vetted through county legal and have been established for decades to limit liability. So there was a process there to get them on board with actually just sending us when it is a true CARES call. But once we got PSC on board with it, then when the sheriff expressed his resistance to it, we said, okay, well, thanks for sharing, but they control the radio waves. So we're going to be on the radio. Might as well get on board with it. And the community wants it. City of Half Moon Bay wants it. Everybody along the coast side wants it. They're tired of Sandra Harmon's and Yanira Serrano's happening. For such a small community, 2 people shot in mental health related incidences in a 10-year period is really a reckless amount of people. Not saying your deputies did anything wrong, but they want something different. So finally, Sheriff Volanos at the time said, okay. And, but the reception from Christina Corpus before she was even elected was phenomenal. And she has been nothing but great. We have everybody on board now. Yes. Sal, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Spencer. Could you expand more on hiring non-licensed staff?
Sure.
And if you plan on expanding?
We do plan on expanding. We're talking with Sheriff Corpus right now about bringing the CARES program to the Bayside. She's specifically earmarking the North Fair Oaks neighborhood. Millbrae has asked for a proposal from us, so we've submitted that. We're trying to get Millbrae to piggyback with the Sheriff's Department, since the Sheriff's Department already patrols Millbrae. Why have 2 separate contracts when you could just have one contract that covers both areas? And we're not looking for licensed clinicians because we're not doing therapy. We're looking to de-escalate, stabilize, and connect to therapy and other resources. So when you eliminate that requirement for somebody to be a licensed MFT or LCSW and have to hire that many people to staff a CARES vehicle, you're eliminating the majority of the expense of this type of a program. So we're able to pay somebody $30 an hour, which is a really good hourly rate for somebody that's a licensed CADAC certified drug and alcohol counselor with co-occurring disorder tag on to that, and specific experience in de-escalation and crisis management. $30 an hour in San Mateo County, that's a good hourly rate. You want to get somebody in there who's a licensed LCSW or an MFT, 2 of those in a van, you're talking about $120,000 a year in salary alone, not including benefits. That becomes a very expensive program, and it's too much. You don't need a brain surgeon to put on a Band-Aid. Did that answer the question? I can
Yes.
elaborate if you want me to.
No, that's.
And I mean it sincerely when I'm looking for people that have been there, done that. That's the biggest requirement for me. Somebody that is going to go in there with a sense of purpose, a sense of passion, a sense of empathy, a sense of understanding, that won't get frustrated when they get resistance, that knows how to roll with resistance, that understands motivational interviewing and how to use it, and is persistent. Because in that person they're talking to on the street, there is something that they see in themselves.
This is very enlightening because I know from other presentations, we've come to learn hiring those licensed clinicians. They're having the most difficult time doing it. And so we're looking at, starting up, grassroots, like, our own little thing. And it's like, and that's like huge, like, how are we gonna do that? Because it's like no one else, and those are bigger programs. They're established programs, and they can't hire someone. And I'm like, this is gonna be very difficult for us.
San Mateo County, man, it is the most expensive to live in. And so we're having a hard time, school teachers, police officers, whatever the profession is, to hire people to work in the county. You got to be able to pay them enough to at least live nearby and not have to commute from Tracy or Manteca or Gilroy. So you have to be able to pay them enough. It's difficult to hire for the county. But when we eliminate that stringent requirement of license, I mean, it's what Cahoots has done. They've never had licensed people in their vans. It's an EMT and it's a crisis counselor.
What San Francisco did, they have licensed clinicians, and the reason being is because they still billed and they still did a diagnosis. So because they're doing a diagnosis and doing a full-on psych assessment, psych evaluation, when they're putting people on a 5150 or a 5585, there needs to be a diagnosis for billing, for billing, right? Because you have to have a licensed clinician, or at least somebody who's, you know, has been certified, but by the board, to do those diagnoses. So Cahoots, it's supposed, you know, the original is a clinician, a paramedic, and a peer. The way that people are doing things now, or I think people who've kind of modeled after Cahoots are now kind of going their own way and to fit the way that their city is. But that's like one of the biggest reasons why we have to hire clinicians, is because we have to bill Medi-Cal and bill private insurance and liability. So that's like the main big reason why these bigger crises have to hire clinicians like that.
When we do have to do a 5150, a voluntary 5150, the clinical director for El Centro, who is a licensed LCSW, is called in, and she'll show up and she'll meet with them at the hospital and facilitate the paperwork and the handoff.
I was just gonna ask, well, how much, I think you mentioned about community getting more involved, or did I mishear that? Or I know you did a lot of outreach,
Yeah.
but maybe I'll just reframe it. How much is community getting more involved in types of efforts like this? How much more widely understood, involved?
I mean, we're a household name now on the coast, you know, the CARES program. They have, you know, downtown events, we're at all of them. Pumpkin Festival, we're there. Mavericks Festival, we're there. And people are regularly coming up and saying, oh, you helped their family, or you helped somebody down the street, or you met with my son at his school. And so, you know, we've kind of embedded ourselves into the community, and that took some time to get done. As it will take for anywhere else that we go, you know.
Thank you, Jeff.
All right.
Crystal, you're still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. I'm gonna hand the reins to you since you're online. You can.
That's okay, Ardell. You're doing a great job. Go for it, Arno.
Are you guys done with me?
I believe so. Thank
Okay.
you very much.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
For tonight.
Let me leave a stack of business cards in case you guys
Please.
have any follow-up questions. Or, yeah, anything else you want to discuss, shoot me an email.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And I will promptly respond to it, and yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Very good.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Okay, come on.
Do you want a card?
Are we going on time?
We are 25 minutes past 7. I think we're okay. I believe that was what just occurred was number 3 on our agenda, just discussion of CARES, which went very well, I believe. So at this point, we will, unless someone would like to add or say something, we could take our short recess.
We need a recess?
No,
What are we saying?
I'm okay with that.
You okay?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Good,
right.
good one.
I'm all right with that, unless you guys want.
Behind the camera, you guys would never know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
You wanted to, sure.
5-minute break.
Yeah, we'll break here for 5 minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you take care of business, we're, yeah, stretch.
I think there's one, wait, there's a key code? I never.
You can, there's one right here too, if you want to just.
I was on YouTube with,
The one on,
Mr. Essex just shared that about hiring
Does it?
non,
Yeah,
Thank you.
those are very different.
yeah, from all the other.
Yeah, yeah.
And I
If
know-
I can pipe in from the corner over here.
Hi.
Hey, those really amazing questions, everyone. That was so great. I took down a lot of notes of things to look into that you asked about. I'd love to, when we come back from the recess, if there's time, Vice Chair, just ask you all if there's anything in particular you really liked that you wanted us to look into more.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay, I'll pause the recording for the recess.
Thank you. Yeah, 5 minutes and then.
Oh, what time are we back then?
Thank you, Amy. Okay. Continuing on with our agenda, item number 5, we have a commission discussion of information learned from outside presentations.
Are we going? Yeah.
I think
Oh,
Amy asked to just have a little.
oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I forgot already. Thank you.
So how much time we want to do debrief? What do you think? 5 minutes? That's not about right?
Yeah, maybe 10, 15. Maybe we can also even go around and if everyone wants to share what they thought about it, what they liked.
I like that idea, Amy. We'll go around. And then if you have something you'd like to say or add, and again, just to be clear, we're the presentation that was given tonight, right? By Jeff, okay. Is there anyone who would like to start?
I
Yeah.
like the fact that,
Thank you.
sure, that, he's looking for, that CARES is looking for people that have lived experience. Because I think that's important when you're dealing with people who have mental health issues or drug, related issues. If you don't understand, what somebody who's on heroin or somebody who's on some serious drugs is dealing with, you have no clue how to approach it and what to expect. And and same thing with mental health. You have to, just like you were saying about, hiring police officers who have, great degrees and all those other things, but they don't have any street experience or lived experience. I think that's somewhat dangerous, and it would be so much better. They'd be able to work better with the community if they had some lived experience. So I like that about the program.
I will continue on what you were just talking about, Paula, Claudine. The fact that they hired people with history, we'll call it, allows them to have an empathy with the people they're serving, as opposed to, and my brother's a police officer, so as opposed to a police officer who may be able to generate some sympathy, it's not the same as empathy. So that was something I think we all picked up on, was that the staff that they're hiring are all able to do that. And we can see the success they've had in just a year. So just going off a little bit on a tangent, I'm really impressed with what they've been able to do with the little money they received, because he threw out, he gave us specifics earlier in his presentation, like how much seed money he got. It was like initially 75,000, then he got another, I don't know, 100,000 somewhere, but that's not a lot of money to start a program like this. And for them to be able to take that little money and still be around a year later and have grown is quite impressive. So I really think what they've done is definitely something at least I will take a closer look at before we go to the council to present something.
Mm-hmm.
I like everything I've heard. One of the problems I have with a lot of the programs is that it's the same problem, teachers and educators, and it's why can't they pay people to live here, living wage? And so I don't know, I think maybe more emphasis should be put on trying to, because if the people who are getting paid, if they're worried about stuff, they're having their own mental issues, right? So they're not really clean, or you have lived experience, but at some point in your life you want to be content and relaxed and not have things to worry about. And especially want people who are going out on these calls, if they're in San Mateo County or South City, to feel like that their services are respected enough that we pay them what they deserve.
I kind of want to piggyback on Carol about that. I feel that same exact thing. $30 to do this job is not enough. You're talking about people who have lived experiences, who are constantly getting re-traumatized or put into that kind of environment where it could potentially trigger them or, you know, have them bring up stuff. So, I mean, like right off the bat, to take care of these people would definitely take them to at least have a therapist. And $30 for living in this here in the Bay Area, plus adding therapy, food, it's just, I already know $30 is not enough. I think that's like my only critique about that, or like a lot of my critiques about why things need to be funded from like the county or from the city, why they need to be actual city jobs, so that they are insured, they have life insurance. Because again, this job is dangerous. Like it is, there's like potential for it to be really dangerous. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to piggyback on Carol about saying that's like one critique that I have, is that wage for doing this, and anybody who does this kind of job needs to have hazard pay because of the kind of environments they're walking into. And I just don't think $30 is enough. So I think we could definitely learn from how they were able to work with their budget or work within the means that they had, but definitely thinking about, you know, if this is something that we want somebody to have, you know, like longevity for this person, then we have to pay them appropriately. We need to be able to really give them benefits so that they're able to stay on the job and not have to worry about their mental health while on the job, and how to pay rent or how to live while doing this job. So.
Let me go with that. Yeah, I'm in agreement with that. There is one point he was saying that I can't remember my notes. He was saying that he knows that they don't pay enough. He did say that, and I was going to ask him why not. So I think I'm in agreement that giving them a fair, you know, a reasonable, whatever it is, whatever the package is, it should be very, very reasonable. Now, with that said, program wise, I'm a big fan of this. I think it exemplifies what we are in the area, being innovative, right? And where we are in the life cycle. Do we have to go all out? Maybe. I mean, that's a decision where we want to be, right? But I think if we focus on something very specific, give it the right experience, and being very kind of like startup mindset, right? That's reflective of being industrial and innovative, and being very efficient in the process. And I think the experience that we noticed that that was very impressed was that lived in pure element, right? As a community of South City, what is it that we want to be defining? Is it going to be I'm sorry, no disrespect. Are we going to be a very clinically, you know, machine, or are we really tuned in to be accessible, to have all voices to be heard, and be truly empathetic as a community? I think there's a great opportunity for at least this early iteration of.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the points made. This seems like it was an established organization, and they were very efficient with the money that they had. I wonder, and this could be I guess this could be something that we could look into. But it seems like there was that organization, but they also have relationships with schools, with, you know, 7-Elevens, other organizations. And I think that's something that we could benefit from, just into looking into our model and how we want to build out our model. What organization can we partner with? Can we learn from? Can we refer people to? I'm sure I'm forgetting your name, but I'm sure you know who we have right now. You know, they have knowledge about organizations to refer to and resources in the community. But are there other organizations and resources that we're just not aware of right now? Yeah, that's something that I think we could look into. And one thing that I also thought that I also really liked was that this organization in Half Moon was a distinct entity from the police department, and that they responded to calls on their own. And I wonder if that's something that we want to discuss and look into.
I was thinking about around how the how this team in South San Francisco is going to unfold, and like how large, like how comprehensive, because of hearing what Jeffrey had to share today, that that they help, like they they really look at each client, like with try to help them with with everything they need to be safe. And that's something that's missing here, in South San Francisco. Yeah, they're going to be open for 7 days a week. I think maybe 24/7 might not be, I don't know, but I think, like, just over the weekend, we just had someone ran over here on Grand Avenue, and they lost their life. And we only know, like, those in the small circle know about it, but it's like no one else knows, and like stuff like that like happens, and it's still not public. I don't know if what's why they're holding it back, or when it will be public. But there's yeah, I was just thinking around how that's gonna unfold, how comprehensive do we want it to be.
And I think he said that they had a set of hours, saw that there was a need for different hours, and switched it.
And maybe one more comment. I thought one thing about I appreciated is that I think he was the first that actually sounded like he kind of did some into, or at least share some understanding of South City, and threw in some thoughts. Based upon this. So I think he offered up almost. Unless that's one thing I think he kind of studied us, or at least knew us a little bit, compared to, I appreciate the other guests. I'm just saying that extra thing is like, okay, and it's almost, he's living and breathing, really tuning in to taking care of people. So I think there's something about that perspective. I don't want to make sure, oh, this is the holy grail moment, or the thing, but there's some things that's like, it's interesting.
Okay, if no one else had any more comments on that, then Amy's taking notes there, so thank you, as is Mary Jo, sounds like. So if we'll now go to our agenda, take a look. 5 mission discussion information, learn from outside presentation. So we start to do that, including presentations from mental health crisis service comparison. Oh, okay. I believe this is now where Crystal, are you gonna be able?
Yeah, I'm here.
There you are. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm here.
Crystal, if you don't mind, I would just love to introduce this item real quick.
Yeah, go for it.
Cool. So as we chatted about in the subcommittees, we would like to summarize all the information and all your feedback we've gotten over the last few months with these outside presentations and the data presentation. Crystal has started making slides summarizing what we've learned in the program. And so now we'd like she'll share those slides with you, but also we'd like to get your input, the things that you came up with in the subcommittees, and any reflections or feedback you've had over these last few months. We'll put it all together in a presentation, I'll also go back over the notes and hopefully you all can present to council together. And kind of come up with your recommendations, the things you like, the things you want staff to look into more. And we can, after we create the slides and a deliverable for that, we can continue to research that as we look on how to evaluate this program. So thanks for letting me introduce it again. And Crystal, please feel free.
Oh, right on. You could pull it up for me, Amy. Cool, thanks. Cool. So ever since we started getting the presentations, we started what are all abilities between them, but also, you know, like a nice little snapshot of can you guys hear me?
I think it's.
It was garbled a moment ago. You sound fine now, though.
Okay, good. Maybe I was just talking too fast. I'll try to slow down. I just get so excited. Okay. So but yeah, it's just a nice little like comparison, kind of what we've learned so far, the takeaways from all the different programs. So yeah, so we can kind of get started with that. Next slide, Amy, if you don't mind. So I kind of have everything divided up between the problem, you know, just talking about like why the county even wanted this and the cities that are involved, what that pilot program is, what that looks like, the other models that had presented to us. And then this is kind of where I'm, you know, we could get together to talk about what this expansion will look like. So first thing is now the problem. So the first problem, kind of, I was doing a lot of research about this, about why the county even wanted to have this pilot program. So the data that they had collected suggested that there was overuse of, next slide, Amy, sorry. The overuse of 911 and EMS. So you had police responding to non-violent mental health calls and the emergency rooms were full. So this is like, you know, something that is countrywide. Like this is happening a lot. And we also noticed that here, there's not a lot of hospitals here in our county. We have one big main hospital, which is Mills Peninsula. But besides that, you know, that's just one huge hospital for the entire county. And I know that we have Kaiser as well, but what they were seeing was a lot of these emergency rooms were full, and a lot of those patients weren't even there for medical reasons, right? They were there for mental health. Unnecessary interventions, the triage was the interventions that they were using wasn't the right intervention, or it could have been better. The referrals, there was no linkages or anything like that. So a lot of these, you know, patients, a lot of these families were kind of just left in the dust as soon as, you know, a 911 came on and they're like, well, there's nothing that we can do about this, and then walk away. So the families kind of had to like deal with their own problem at that point. So there was no actual triage, there was no referral, there was no linkage. And then what that appropriate follow-up care is like, right? So I think Jeffrey, his name was, you know, they had talked about how they always like do some kind of follow-up afterwards. That's important for a lot of these mental health, because again, when we're coming in at a crisis, this family is also in a crisis, not just that individual, but everybody around them. And, you know, once you take them away or once you kind of de-escalate things, that family still doesn't necessarily know what to do, nor that person or the community that they're in. So definitely having some kind of follow-up care, a little bit of hand-holding, especially if they're new to the system, new to the mental health system, or, you know, what it's like to be hospitalized when you're there for like 72 hours, what to expect afterwards. So definitely wanted some kind of follow-up care. Next slide, Amy. Cool. So with all that data that they had come up with, and here's their like you know, what they were looking for, that's when they came up with the Community Wellness and Crisis Response Pilot Project. So they launched this December 6, 2021. And again, it was a mental health professional that was teamed up with law enforcement. And they picked these 4 cities: Daly City, Redwood City, San Mateo, South San Francisco. I couldn't find information on why they chose these 4, except for that these are the 4 biggest cities in our county. Daly City being the biggest one. So I'm not quite too sure again, like why, but I'm just assuming that it's because of the four biggest. So yeah, so that was launched about a little roughly over about like a year, almost and a half ago. All right. And then so the goals that they were looking for, right, with the pilot project, next slide, Amy, is they have twin goals, which is provide an alternative to jail and the overburdened hospital emergency rooms for the nonviolent individuals that are experiencing a behavioral health crisis, and then to de-escalate 911 calls, right? Because all these, like 911's getting flooded with all of these calls that aren't necessarily appropriate for law enforcement. And to provide the appropriate compassionate care for nonviolent individuals. Next slide, Amy. Here's the budget that they had given us. So the county contributed 468,388. So that is, they do this for 2 years. So 1 year, 468, and the other year is another 468. The city, so all those 4 different cities contribute 408,388 over the course of 2 years. So the total for the 2-year pilot is 1.5 mil. So that's the 4 cities, the 4 clinicians teaming up with law enforcement. 1.5 mil. So just kind of thinking about what Jeffrey said, how they used, what was it, 75,000 or something like that?
As seed money, and then
Yeah.
Right, and then,
yeah,
Half a mil, right?
he's thinking
Right.
500 million. Yeah.
yeah. And so here's kind of what the budget was that the city and that the county had provided. So definitely something. So, I mean, as far as our city, I don't know, looks like we got, I don't know, definitely, what is that? 408, like about 800, maybe close to what, four, I don't know. I'm not going to do the math, but you guys are going to get this right.
What are you trying to figure out?
I don't know really, just to see how much South City actually, like puts in there. I mean, you're talking about 1 clinician, right? Well, I mean, 1.5 for 4 clinicians. I don't know where like how that budget gets disseminated, but just keeping in mind that these clinicians, this is what this next slide is about, is they're contracted clinicians, right? Again, and we just learned about that, right? Because clinicians from a county or from a city are definitely going to be more expensive, that's for sure. And because these are contracted clinicians, we're talking probably about $30, maybe about $25 to $30 for these clinicians that are contracted. And so they're contracted.
Yeah, so I know you're trying to get into an aspect of granular, but are you processing out loud just the general budget of what it is? What is that what you're trying to do?
I'm
trying to do now.
Well, what I was trying to talk about with the budget was, I guess, just to kind of keep that in mind, that budget just in the back of your head of like how much things would actually cost for a city. So, I mean, if they have 1.5 mil for 4 cities, I was trying to figure out what's the math that South City is actually, like, themselves, like how much does South City actually spend of that? Like,
Yeah.
so if it's,
I'm just thinking.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, this thinking simple math is 1.5 divided by 4 cities.
Right.
That's 25% quarter, so about 400K.
Yeah.
Well, so the numbers have to be, the final numbers are a little bit different. I think what was actually invoiced, but close. But the idea for the cost was that the county paid half, and then the 4 cities each paid 12.5%. That's the rough breakdown.
Cool.
But yeah, we can try and get updated numbers. It's a bit hard to pin down, but yeah, we can do that for this presentation.
Right. And that was the initial budget. That was like going back into like the archives of like, what was the budget that what was budgeted for this pilot. And it was that. I mean, I'm sure that it's changed at some point, but yeah. So again, that they're contracted clinicians, and like, and I know I have a bias here of like, let's make sure that this is like a city funded or like a county thing. And I'll try not to get that in the way and try to be a little bit more neutral about that. But yeah, so here's the 4 awesome clinicians that have been piloting this. Mika Selly is obviously ours. There's 3 of them that are licensed, and one of them that still has an associate's, which is Brianna Fair. But all of them are supervised by a Star Vista supervisor, along with the, what is it, like one of the captains at the police station. So that's something to kind of remember too, is that they are getting supervised clinically by Star Vista, who's like slightly removed from the program, but then on site is getting supervised by law enforcement.
Mhm.
All right. So next slide, Amy. So currently, what this program looks like. Here's their current services that they have right now. So they are Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. That's the way that they have it right now. And they have mental health and substance use. So they get triage to a mental health crisis, to do a safety risk assessment. So that mental health crisis could be, something that is rooted in mental health. It could be rooted in substance use, or it could be rooted in a combination of both. They also do conflict management and de-escalation. So they reduce contact between individuals with a behavioral health issue and the criminal justice system. So that's kind of what their big focus is on. And then their training. So they get trained by BHRS as well as law enforcement. And then as far as linkage and resources, they definitely get resources. I think specifically for South San Francisco, Mika has one of the main resources she's been sending these families to for mental health services, specifically mental health services, is the Daly City Clinic. South San Francisco only has, from the city itself, it has a primary clinic. So like just like your regular primary care physician. So as far as like mental health, doesn't seem like we have a city clinic, although you had brought this up earlier, Stephen. We do have partners here in South San Francisco. Edgewood is a big one. That's in South San Francisco that we might be able to partner up with if we need some kind of linkage in the future. So that's something that I was able to find out. But as far as like adult services, I'm not too quite sure just yet. Yeah, so that's kind of what the pilot looks like right now. Let's go to the next slide, Amy. So the team, again, this is still the pilot program. The team is the mental health clinician and then the South San Francisco and law enforcement officer. I put South San Francisco for our city. They respond to child and adult, non-criminal crisis, behavioral and mental health related problems. They also respond to critical incidents like what's it called? The shooting or what had happened recently. The foundation was like giving away, the lockdown, that was also one of them. So the natural disasters and then community violence. So just like the shootings that were happening. And then the services, so crisis intervention, de-escalation. They also have support services. They do the 5150, 5585 evaluations. They do follow up, and then they do resources and safety planning. So that's, what our city specifically is doing. This is what Mika is doing with law enforcement here. So again, that's Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. Questions about that so far? And anything that I missed, if you guys feel like something needs to be in this, or, that I had missed something, again, I just kind of we did like bare bones. Here's, just the gist of what these programs are providing. All right, we can keep going. Let's go next slide then, Amy. So here's our other models. The first one that we have is Cahoots. So they were the first one that presented to us. So they are 24 hours, 7 days a week. Their team is a certified medic, a trained mental health crisis worker. The response, so they respond to non-criminal crisis, homeless, intoxication, disorientation, substance use, mental health related problems, and dispute resolution. Their services, non-emergency medical assessment, first aid, transportation to the social services. So whatever that is, whether they need like housing or, need to go to a clinic, they could do that. Crisis intervention, counseling services, and mediation. SCRT, so SCRT again from San Francisco was modeled after Cahoots. That has changed. They have a certified medic, a mental health clinician, and a peer support specialist. They respond to adult only, non-criminal crisis, homelessness, intoxication, disorientation, substance use, and mental health related problems, as well as dispute resolution. Their services are non-emergency medical assessment care, first aid, transportation to social services, crisis intervention, counseling services, and mediation as well. San Francisco, starting in April, is changing this. They're no longer going to be following the Cahoots model. It doesn't make sense for the city's response. They are taking away the clinicians. The big reason why they're taking away the clinicians is they've noticed that they weren't 5150 people as much on the street. The clinicians were doing a lot of like clinical work, which again could take a long time. In my experience, hours. But I think because SCRT was rooted in the fire department, they had a time limit of 15 minutes. 15 minutes of interaction with the public. And they needed, and I guess when they had done their numbers, the public was still really upset that there was still a lot of homeless people on. So they're removing mental health clinicians. And if you call SCRT to come out onto the street to respond to an unhoused individual, they're taking them to the hospital, no matter what.
Crystal, is this the only slide for all the SFDPH programs, or are some of those on another slide?
I think I have, no, we have ours. We have Alameda, and then we have Comprehensive Crisis Services, which was our team.
Okay.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I think the next one, so we didn't finish the Alameda Crisis one just because there's so much of their services. If you guys remember Alameda, like it also depended on where you lived. If you go to the next one, Amy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they had tons of teams, which was awesome. It was just really hard to kind of figure out what days of the week they were open. I remember they said some of them were 24/7, some of them weren't. And then it depended on like, what city you were in and what kind of, what the nature was of the call.
Because they were shooting from county perspective.
Yeah, that was a complicated network because they took a lot of grant monies and just started putting things all over the place.
Yeah.
But it's kind of to the point of that you mentioned about ecosystem resources, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's something we can still glean off of that. The partnering, right? The leveraging of resources into that. But, I'm sorry.
No. This is good. This is good that we're like talking about this. This is what it's for. It's definitely meant for discussion and like talking about what we liked, what we didn't like of things. So, I mean, yeah, I think you guys are bringing up a good point. It's all over the place, and they're like piecemealing this and piecemealing that. Oh, absolutely.
I gotta imagine there's got, and then that would be confusing. Like, who do you call? I don't know.
Right.
Absolutely.
I do like that they have the geriatric assessment and response team, just because I feel with like a lot of our elders, you really have to take into consideration some of their medical diagnoses. Like if somebody who has dementia or even a UTI, right? Because they could have psychosis like that. But you can't, if somebody has dementia and they're aggressive and psychotic, you can't put them on a hold for that, because that is a medical diagnosis. That is, you can't give them antipsychotics for that. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't work that way. Same thing with a UTI. I mean, you're going to put somebody on antipsychotics that actually needs a medical response versus a psychiatric response. So I do like that they have the geriatric, population separated.
Crystal, not to get too granular of diagnoses, when I'm hearing UTI, sorry, I'm thinking urinary tract infection.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know what to call it. Is that's what you're referring to?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah,
Okay.
there could be like in the elderly, if they have a UTI, it's possible that they could have psychotic symptoms.
Interesting, okay.
Mhm.
Paula Claudine actually had some really interesting comments on the geriatric team. Paula
Oh.
Claudine, I don't know if you're willing to share.
Should I wait till her presentation is over or at this point?
I think it's fine
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
We're all
now, yeah,
set, yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, all I was gonna say is that, my experience for over a decade now is taking care of my mom when she had heart failure. Because of that, it caused renal failure, and then she went into hospice and passed away. And I cared for her all during the 10 years. And then when she passed away a couple years ago, then my dad's still here, but it's affected his health, and so I'm caring for him, and he's dealing with some serious issues. And during these past 2 years, he's been in the hospital. He was in the hospital for about 6 months, and then he's nursing home for about 6 months, and then he's back home for the past 4 months, trying to regain his life, because he was very independent before. For an 80-something plus year old, very independent. So it's a life changer. But so my concern is, our elders, our senior community. There's a lot of needs that they have, and in our subcommittee, I was just discussing how, we have the mental health crisis team that goes out and, accompanies the police and it's important because, somebody who has mental health issues, you want to handle them in a specific, in an educated way. So that's why we have a team or a clinician that goes out, because they're experienced in dealing with people who have those specific issues. We also need something like that for our senior community, because as Crystal was saying, which I've experienced now through these 10 plus years of interacting with the medical professionals and being an advocate for my parents in so many different ways, and so many different types of facilities, Medicare, nursing homes, doctors, pharmacies, all kinds of situations. So many different things that they go through, seniors, as they get older.
And you go through.
And I go through, yeah. So one thing that Crystal said, which is true, for example, what is the term? Somebody who has, for example, diabetes, they have poor circulation in their limbs, their feet, their hands. They get an infection in their toes or their feet. It quickly, gets infected and turns into gangrene, and then sepsis kicks in. And when sepsis kicks in, then they start having some hallucinations and mood swings and bits of aggression, and get confused, and confusion causes aggression because you start to get scared, and depression and all these things set in, and it can cause a serious mood swing. And let's say that person is at home, because at that point, once they reach sepsis, they don't realize that they've reached that point. They don't realize where they are in their state of being. Let's say they start making a lot of noise because they're angry or they're just freaking out, and somebody calls the police, and the police don't have the experience to understand that elders, senior community goes through a lot of different health issues, and that this person is experiencing, a sepsis related issue, and they need to be handled with that understanding. This person is not just aggressive and angry, and you have to, I feel that we need a team of people that have experience dealing with seniors to go out, just like we have with the mental health crisis team, the clinician. The same thing for seniors, and that's only one, one topic, sepsis. But there's, like Crystal said, a UTI can quickly, cause confusion. Blood just goes into the blood, and dementia, and dementia leads to aggression and all kinds of other things. So, there's a lot of things that if you don't have the lived experience, I have the lived experience. So if I was to go out, I would, on one of these calls, I would have the patience because I have the patience in dealing with my parents. And that's very important when you're dealing with seniors. And I have the understanding of the health issues that they go through. Not to say that I'm seeking the position, but somebody who has learned experience, lived experience, this is what they would bring to the plate. And I just think that's important. So I can talk a lot more because I have so much lived experience in this department, but I don't want to take all the time. But I just think it's important.
And if I may add, thank you, because you're directly experiencing that, that's very clear. And at the same time, I think just another element, just to in terms of the senior segment, these are a lot of long timers of Salt City, right? Just honor them, right? That's in and of itself, and making sure that they are paid attention to with their own specific needs.
Yeah, and a lot of times when they are, showing a lot of different things, like they deal with depression because they are lonely, or
right.
they're having health issues, or just a lot of things. So when you understand all those different elements that seniors go through as they age, then you have you better dealing with them when you have to, and it's just important to be educated.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I appreciate you emphasizing that.
Yeah, it's a different community.
Yes, I appreciate that.
Paula, Claudia, can I ask you, when you were taking care of your folks, did you have like a licensed psych nurse assigned to your parent?
No, not at all. No, I wasn't really. And then there's a lot of services that, that might be offered, but for example, my dad doesn't qualify for some services that he needs, it's because he makes more than the limit.
Right.
He doesn't, but he's a vet, but he can't qualify because his pension is too high.
And not to go into full details, but I can appreciate, because my mom, my wife's parents, there's a lot of intricacies. I mean, when you ask that, it's like, what? No, we're not going to get services like that. We have to scrap and scrounge. Yeah.
And then my last comment on that too is, for example, the other issue too is my mom, both my parents are not from the United States. They both have accents. My mom had a serious accent, even though she was here for over 20 years. It was like she just came. And I mean, I thought she spoke very clear, but maybe just because I'm accustomed to her accent. But whenever we go to the hospital, it's like the doctors don't talk to the patient. They talk to the person that brought them. They need to, this might be a whole different discussion, but I feel that sometimes our seniors are not respected as they should. They're, when people see a senior, they think, oh, senior means that they can't think. So let me talk to, the daughter. So a lot of times when they try to talk to me, because they said that they don't understand her, but she spoke very clear. She had an English accent.
Yeah.
It was very clean English. I'd say, no, talk to me. She's right there.
Right there. Yeah.
I mean, you can talk to me after you talk to her.
Especially when they're there. Yeah.
Yeah. So you need to, that's part of the issue too. We have to respect, give the respect to our seniors.
And maybe to that, whatever we're considering, or as we're evaluating, how well do we even not just, just the cultural competencies, right? And when I mean culture, the senior culture, the other cultures, like all the different cultures, how can we actually, beyond competence, how can we be proficient as a community?
Yeah, and I'm just not aware that there's anything in South City that advocates for, our seniors. So
yeah. Well, I think we're trying to get closer to that with what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Seems like.
Well, I think something would be was, like not just have a mental health clinician respond out into the field, but also have a licensed psych nurse or a licensed psych technician respond in the field as well. If they're asking those questions ahead of time at intake or at triage or something like that, asking if there is any kind of medical condition or any history of medical condition. As soon as you hear that they, have a history of a medical condition or do have a medical condition, or maybe the crisis is rooted in some kind of medical issue, like let's say they are diabetic and they haven't been taking their diabetes medication, and like that's like that's pretty serious. You can die from that. And so,
Yeah.
that, right, that would qualify for them to be put on some kind of psychiatric hold, maybe not a psychiatric hold to get transferred to a psychiatric hospital, but on a psychiatric hold just to get them to the ER to get medically cleared, or at least, get them medically stable. But yeah, that's like one thing that could happen is, as we're thinking about this and how to expand this, what would be appropriate for our city. I definitely think some kind of psych nurse, or I mean, even if we don't have a nurse, maybe, even if we just have a doc, an actual medical doc, whether a psychiatrist or an actual physician who, we have access to ask these kind of questions, these medical questions. Hey, we got this person who has like a medical condition, should we put them on a hold and get them to the hospital? But, I think definitely better to have, like a psych nurse, because then they're trained in all of that, right? They're trained in not just the psychiatry, but also the medical.
Right, and I hear you, and I think, I think that's what if I'm understanding what we're doing in the process right now, we're just trying to see the big picture of what's the experience. I mean, there's one component, I'm saying there's the reactive, like tough service, which may need clinical, and then there's the proactive, humanistic connection relationships, and we're trying to understand what's the right holistic experience. That's what I'm sensing here. I think that's what we're doing in the process right now. We're trying to evaluate the different programs and inspiration. Is that what? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, exactly. All right, cool. Yeah. So they, again, so Alameda Crisis had tons of services. I think the ones to point out again was the geriatric one, the Familiar Faces team. If you guys remember, this is, I think, the one, I think people in the field call them frequent flyers, right? These are the ones that are typically getting called on or have like multiple interactions with either law enforcement or the emergency room or behavioral health. And then I think the community connections was like, this is also kind of important. Getting those people who are in denial about having some kind of issue, but everybody around them, family, parents, the community around them really wants them to get help. There's no law saying that we could force somebody to accept any kind of medical care unless they're 5150able or, meet criteria for 5585. They are within their right to decline any kind of medical treatment. But community connections, it really seems like they try their best to try to get these people into mental health services. So I think something like that is needed, especially for a lot of the adult children. Like we get, you have lots of parents who have their adult children living out here on their own and may, get maybe off their medication because they're not quite taking care of themselves very well, or might have, gotten into some kind of substance use. But yeah, I think those are some highlights of Alameda Crisis that I thought was really interesting.
Sal had some interesting comments on youth related programs as well, if you're comfortable sharing, Sal.
For the youth, did you say, well, also about the homelessness, unsheltered population that, well, I work for Star Vista, right? So I have experience working with youth, whether, it's from schools in San Francisco, SFUSD, and juvenile hall, and with foster youth. So around youth, I guess, I mean, I would just, more around like the high school kids, you know, but the high school kids and middle school kids. They do cause, you know, that it's, they do cause some trouble. They do need a lot of attention. So is that what you're referring to, Amy?
Yeah, but also your comments on homelessness too are really relevant, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot of homelessness, you know, in South San Francisco that is kind of not really, they're kind of invisible, you know, like a lot of people live in their cars. A lot of them don't want to have any kind of, you know, interaction with anyone. Yeah, we're still like, you know, they're still around, so they do need, they also need services, right? Like today, how Mr. Jeffrey Essex was explaining, like, doesn't matter, you know, if they called 10 times, like, they're not gonna stop attending to them, you know, until, you know, they get better. You always wanna not think that way, you know, that they're never gonna get better. You know, you wanna think that eventually they will get the services they need, and that we can link them, you know, and we will help them. And they're out there. Yeah, we do have it's cold, right? I mean, it's in the winter, so for them, especially women and men to survive in South San Francisco during a winter, that's tough, you know, and not having all the services that, for example, San Francisco does. Like, you know, that's, you know, those are some tough people.
So you're saying make sure we account for them?
Yeah, you know, they're there. Yeah, they're there. During the one day count, I think we only recorded 40. I don't know if that's accurate, you know. Like, there's other cities that were like so high that didn't make sense. Like, I think like Pacifica scored like 150, 140, which I don't think, like.
So it sounds off. Yeah.
Yeah, like, you know, for us too, it sounds kind of off and a bit, you know, in a way, like, you gotta know where to look. Like, they're under the bridges,
Right.
You know, they're all sticking together.
And those are even parked, you know, those parked, right, like saying cars,
Yeah.
campers, yeah.
And it's winter, so.
I've seen people at vehicles at Orange Park that I suspected were folks living in the vehicle recently.
And, you know, and if it is fairly low, I mean, in a way that's, I think having one is not good, but if it's low, then what is it that we can make sure that it doesn't get even more than that, right? Whatever it is now, but to your point, what is it? Yeah. And hopefully one of these or some package of programs. Will
Yeah, shelters, you know, like,
yeah,
their meds, some of them are undocumented, have no, you know, it varies.
I know there was a case in Paradise Valley in December, right across the street from my house, basically. There were two guys that were sitting in a car. It was one of the coldest nights, you know, and they were burning charcoal, I believe, trying to stay warm. And they died of carbon monoxide.
In their car?
In their car. So that's really recent. That was really upsetting.
One too many.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are living families like in one room, you know. So a lot of them are also one paycheck away from not having the money for rent, you know. So
Does Park City not have a shelter?
we do.
Yeah, that's good. So I'm not-
Right next to, right, behind Costco.
The business center.
Safe harbor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Oh, St. Harbor.
oh, yes, yes.
That's fine. And you know, and you bring up an interesting dynamic about, you know, there are certain, you know, how, you know, or living situation where they're just trying to maximize people because of cost. And they're right on the edge of maybe the paycheck or whatever. So kind of, yeah, how do we, you know, how do we make it known, whatever type of wellness support through whatever it is, you know, how do we make sure that every single voice is being recognized and heard? I think that's the greatest challenge. How do we recognize it, regardless of what we decide on, whether it's the small version now or the big version later? How can we make sure early on and all the time every voice is accounted for? What are we accounting for at this point? I actually, yeah.
Well, we went off on a couple of tangents.
Yeah, I guess we've been sitting on this.
We need to kind of bring it back home.
Yeah.
Well, I think, I think we're just talking about the different services. I think, you know, like looking at Alameda Crisis, it's bringing to light all the different services that we need to look at, right? Like, I think that's what's great about this, even though it's a lot, it's actually, it kind of breaks things down for us as far as, you know, what kind of services we need to look for. So now we know we need to do the geriatric. Now we need to know, you know, we know that we need to also be looking at, youth services specifically, and then specifically on unhoused services. So I think it's definitely not that big of a tangent, but you know, I think like it's definitely helped hone us in on what we're going to be carrying forward when we're thinking about what are the recommendations that we're going to make to the city council. Right.
And help remember, when are we planning? When, I think, Amy, I think we even touched on that at the data meeting. When are we planning to propose?
We
Roughly?
haven't nailed down a date yet.
Yeah,
okay.
I think it might be useful to have at least one more session to go over slides, and I'll probably do a staff report.
At least.
Yeah, yep.
But also, Amy, remember the thing was happening with the county and with law enforcement. Law enforcement was going to be having their own meeting about what they want to see in the expansion of this program as well, right? Like we wanted to make sure that we wanted to hear what those were before we present to city council.
Yeah, well, we found too that the pilot program has been extended. I think, sorry, Crystal, I don't think you got this because you weren't in a subcommittee, but the pilot program was extended till June, July of 2024 to the end of the fiscal year, so that we weren't left without funding in the middle of the fiscal year.
Awesome.
So that pushes back, I think, the evaluation a little bit further. So that's why we're hoping to do this presentation as like a landing deliverable to say, here's what we're interested in. Can you take a look at this and ask staff, you know, me and another staff that'll work on this, to look into your recommendations, and then we'll push back the final recommendations on how to expand the program to be a little closer to the evaluation and the end of the program.
Is there anything maybe even stopping us? I mean, I know that he's been coming to the virtual meetings, but having Chief Campbell, or at least, you know, before we present, right? Like, let's have Chief Campbell look over it, or Mika look over it, or Captain, I forget his name, look over it. Yeah, Plank, right? You know, just to kind of like see what they think before we push it to city council.
I think that's a great idea. Leslie, do you think that sounds like a good plan?
100%. The chief did email that he was unable to come tonight to give another presentation. So, but yeah, I think that definitely running it and getting their feedback and hearing what they have to say and what they've learned too, kind of, then you guys can, you know, come up with something together.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, that does remind me of, you know, because we've been very closely hearing from, you know, the chief of police side. And then there's these other similar programs, they've actually, you know, whether they were born or connected directly with the fire side. So how EMTs, I haven't heard that side of our story, of our process, EMT fire. I mean, how relevant is that?
That's something that, you know, we should talk about that with our fire chief, Jess, and just kind of the structure and Now, maybe that's something that Jess can, come and talk about the MT structure for South San Francisco as well to this commission.
Sounds great.
That was good, yes.
All right, I guess we could move on to the next one then.
What? Oh,
Just the next one. I mean, the discussion doesn't stop. We can keep talking, but I think as far as like looking at all the other presentations that were presented. So this one's Comprehensive Crisis Services. This is San Francisco. Obviously, I'm part of this team. So we have the 2 crisis clinicians. And again, those clinicians, some are licensed, some are unlicensed, and some are also counselor level lived experience. They have an AOD 24/7. So that's an administrator on duty. So that's the supervisor. And then the San Francisco Police Department as needed. Those are for those CIT cases, if you guys remember. And then the response is non-criminal crisis, substance abuse, and mental health related problems and dispute resolution. Actually, they do respond to. I guess it's both. It's like a barricaded subject or hostage negotiation kind of thing. We do respond to those. And then our services are crisis intervention, de-escalation, support services, 5150 evaluation. We do quite a bit of follow-up. I know that you had talked about this, Sal. For the youth specifically, if we hospitalize somebody who is a youth, we actually follow up and we have like a dedicated discharge planner for that youth and their family. So when they are released from the hospital, the family is supported and they know what they need to do afterwards. We do like all the linkage. So they are already linked to some mental health services before they even leave the hospital. We have resources as well as safety plan. As far as response to, we also respond to disasters quite a bit, and community violence and the vehicular manslaughter, vehicular deaths, I guess I should say, or but pedestrian deaths. And so that what Sal had brought up about somebody getting hit on Grand Street, that's something that Comprehensive Crisis does respond to. So that, I think all of those services that Alameda does, like completely separate and pieced out like that, Comprehensive Crisis does within this one team, which again, I'm a little biased about it just because I'm on this team, but yeah, that's something that I do like. I think that's something that I like about our team that the other ones didn't necessarily have, is you have an AOD. So whether you have licensed or unlicensed or nursing staff or counselor level lived experience counselors, no matter what, you have that one supervisor who is licensed, this AOD that you consult with after every single case to just make sure that, we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's. So I definitely like that. And again, like as far as crisis, everything's crisis, right? Like whether it's disaster, whether it's somebody dying on the street, whether it's a suicide or a homicide, all of that has potential for a mental health crisis, or at least some kind of mental health response, I guess I should say. Oh, and this is 24/7. I forgot to put that.
In person or with phone call?
Oh no, yeah, in person. We're 27 phone call, but we're 24/7 in person. So we go to the hospitals in the middle of the night. We go to the homes in the middle of the night. The only calls that we don't go to right now are adult calls in the middle of the night, like in an SRO. That's like a single room occupancy for safety reasons right now. But we do respond to adult calls that are in the middle of the night if it's like a CIT call. So again, CIT is, the crisis intervention team. That's when we're paired up with SFPD because it's somebody with a weapon or somebody who has a barricaded subject or that is a barricaded subject or somebody that has a hostage in the house. So we go to those 24/7 and the disasters 24/7 and the community violence 24/7. So if there's like a shooting or a stabbing in the middle of the night, we'll go to the hospital and provide services to the family. despite if they're the ones who is under investigation or is the victim. Doesn't matter. We provide services to all of them. Cool. And then so we didn't put CARES on just because this was made before them. So the next slide, Amy, which
Crystal,
is the
before
advantage.
we go on, can we just
Oh, yeah.
ask, Arnell, Stephen, Alan, did you have any other feedback from rewatching this presentation of things that you liked in this presentation?
Wait, which presentation?
The San Francisco one that we watched in the subcommittee?
Mhm.
I have anything else to add.
No, I somehow I missed it. It was 24/7 in person. Somehow I didn't catch that in the. That's why I asked Crystal again if that was 24/7 phone calls or I needed some clarification. So somehow I missed that in the presentation. Because that's super cool that it's 24/7 in person.
Yeah.
Arnell, I think you were asking about the phone line too, and if
I
San
did, yeah.
Francisco could
That's
have
why I was like, yeah.
a phone line 24/7, even if we can't have a clinician 24/7. Is that right?
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, but I thought I didn't realize this unit actually had a team on call 24/7. That's pretty impressive because we all know the cost involved to do that. So
I don't know if you guys remember our numbers though, like, out of all the calls that we get, we only go out on about 20% of them. 80% of them is like all triage. So I think that's what's really interesting about our program is, or even because we're city and county, we have access to a lot. We have access to a lot of collateral information, which I think helps out with like figuring out what's the best thing for this family. We have access to knowing who are their current providers. Can we call their current providers right now? And again, because we're city and county, we could call this clinic and say, hey, we need you to send out a clinician or send out, this person's clinician out to go check on this person. If you can't do it, well, then we can do it. Or if you can't do it, then we can go, or we could do this together. Just because some clinicians don't have, 5150 rights or anything like that to put people on a hold. Not all clinicians do that. So I think that is something that's different. And I think that's a really big advantage that we're city and county and we get access to that. Same thing with the police, like when we're about to go see somebody who on the front end, when we're asking questions about the crisis, about this individual, do they have a weapon? If they have a weapon, like, we pick up the phone, we call 10 away and, just find out, do they have any weapons, that are registered to their home? Have they had any history of aggression or history of violence? Have they been in jail before for any of those crimes? Then, we make a better decision of as far as how to triage this call, right? So if they do have a weapon, then we know, okay, let's take police with us. If they don't have a weapon, then, we go on these crises on our own. There's two of us that go out with like a whole nother team behind us if needed. So.
Yeah, every system that we're exploring has figured out a way that speaks to them. And if I may ask, because for a couple of things, I want to pull back the camera a bit. It'd be really easy to go into details here. I don't think we're in a position to do that at this point, right? I know we're advocating or discerning, but a couple of things, we're now going almost 3 hours. So I want to be respectful of time. How open or willing do we want to stay? It's beyond the 8 hour, the 2 hours, right? That we generally understand to be. So I want to be mindful of that.
And just another thing, Amy had brought up, I think this is another conversation too we had, so you don't feel rushed at a subsequent meeting, just to really evaluate all of these programs, even add in the CARES from tonight and really make it more comprehensive. It's just is for consideration.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, the next section is advantages and disadvantages, and that's not something we necessarily have to go into tonight. Like maybe that's like something that we could bring to the table next month, is really, like now that we kind of have a little snapshot of everything, or, just at least like this little bit of information on everything and like discussing everything. I think next month we could definitely come with, our own opinions about what are the advantages and disadvantages, and really hone in on using that as a guideline to figure out how we want to expand South City on our own, how to expand it.
Yeah, and by the way, thanks, Crystal, for creating these, these little snapshots. That's helpful. I could almost see how even the next iteration of this would be almost like a big grid, right? A super grid as team response and other things that we see everything in one snapshot page, the kind of like executive summary, bullet point, boom. And then we can worry about the details and granular stuff when we formulate one that speaks to something that speaks much more closely to the South City experience.
Right.
So where do we go from here?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's up to us. Like, what do we want to do next? After looking at all of this, we can probably end it here on this slide. Just because we, had already talked about CARES earlier today. We could openly talk about it again if you guys want, or we could end it here and really just Amy, do you mind going to the next slide? And just kind of like starting to think about what are the advantages and disadvantages. I think a lot of us know little bits of South City, and remember, little bits of it from the data that was presented last month. So yeah, I think just sitting with it and figuring it out for each person, like what they think the advantage and disadvantages are. We could probably even do this as a group next month as well. Like if you have any thoughts on this, or coming up with thoughts together next month, I think that's a good place to start.
That'll be a homework.
Yeah.
This is a good launching pad to kind of, as you go away, process what you're talked about tonight, and then think about those advantages and disadvantages to kind of come to the table with some thought starters.
Yeah.
For the next meeting.
And if I may add, I think I shared this with the data group. I'm not sure what's the best way, or maybe maybe it's a small blip. I think what will be helpful in terms of alignment with where South City is going, what it's envisioning. I'm partially referring back to the general plan 2040, right? How closely are we being mindful of this element among everything else that's being road mapped for 2040? So it's not. I think it would be a good checkpoint. Maybe just briefly as to be familiar with that, and as a quick reference, just make sure we're all in alignment.
Okay.
Thoughts?
No, I think that's excellent to
Yeah.
refer to the general plan 100%.
Okay. So I'm not sure is that another homework assignment, or
That's your homework assignment.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, back to you, Arnell.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was, I thought I guess mentally I had deferred to you. I apologize.
It's okay.
No, so if I like what I'm hearing, and I think we should just let this all kind of soak in. And then at our next meeting, we will be able to have, because I don't anticipate another presentation. Is that right, Amy? No other is that?
Yeah, we don't have anything else scheduled.
Okay.
For outside
So-
presentation.
That's, I think that's beneficial to us, because I think we have been, I don't know, I feel I've been inundated with a lot of information with these different programs, all obviously good, and they all seem to work for their respective geographic locations, and we're all trying to figure out what's going to work good for us. for South San Francisco, for South City, since we all have a vested interest in this. I just think we just need to take it upon ourselves to really do our homework, see what we like, what we don't like, and then when we come together, we can then hash it out. And that'll get us one step closer to finalizing a proposal to council. Because I know they're watching us, and I know at some point they'll be wanting to hear from us. What are we going to propose? I think fortunately we got that now that the pilot program has been extended through June 24. I don't think that should be any excuse for us to kind of rest on, back off the pedal. I think we've been kind of going at a very good pace, and we should keep that pace, because we don't know what we might run into. So, but that's just my thoughts.
And on that, so what do you / Crystal think in terms of the structure of the next meeting then? Because it sounds like we don't have a scheduled guest. Are you seeing something, a different experience for us to hit and knock out certain things?
Yeah, I guess it'll be very different. That it'll be, we will have I would say the entire time for our meeting to have a very good discussion. I guess again, the expectation is we're gonna come and we're gonna have some thoughts to discuss, and then we say, I like what you were saying. I don't necessarily agree with you. I mean, that's the kind of conversation I expect to have next month.
That's good.
And so that would require, again, just to reiterate, that would require each of us to do our homework to be effective, to be productive. So.
Okay.
I also think we need to do a nice little side-by-side comparison because now we have the data that, that South City has been doing. And I think we need to have that right next to us as we're discussing the advantages and disadvantages, right? We need to make sure that whatever we're going to recommend, it's reflected in the data. So I think even, next month when we meet, we need to bring that data back to the table. And, if there's something that the data group had seen, some highlights or really telling points that, that are must-haves, I think that's something that the data committee can bring to the table for sure.
Okay.
I concur.
I concur too.
Okay. Well, if there's no other comment, then do I hear a motion to call the meeting to adjourn?
I make a motion to call the meeting.
Do I hear a second?
Are there any items from commissioner staff though that you'd first like to share?
Oh, thank you, Mary Jo.
So do any commissioners have anything to share?
This Saturday, my band will be playing at Fort McKinley at 8 o'clock. So you guys are all welcome to come down and have some fun. There'll be 80s rock, pop, Latin, R&B, all danceable cover tunes.
Saturday,
8 p.m. Fort McKinley.
But I know that you're a fairly regular, so that's good to know, because for me, it's a Saturday one.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Good to know.
I'll let you guys know when things pop up.
Cool, thank you.
And I'll just add from staff, we are this week interviewing 4 candidates for the DEI position. So they've gone through a first round of panels with a very highly qualified panel group, including Amy. And we had Shireen from the county and Brianna from Redwood City and this assistant city manager from San Mateo County that sat on that panel. And then they forwarded their recommendations, and so myself and Sharon Reynolds and Christina Fernandez are meeting with the 4 candidates. We met with one today and 3 more on Wednesday.
Cool.
Great.
Nice.
The expected time to fill
Awesome.
these?
Cool.
ASAP.
Yeah.
Yeah, also, once they're on board, would love to schedule the retreat for this group, and they can come, all can meet and all come help transition. Probably no sooner than end of April, but we'll keep in touch.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just really quick, 2 things out of discussion that if staff has the time to look into that could be useful for our next discussion. is like the feasibility of Mika replacing SSFPD for certain types of calls, kind of like the Half Moon Bay model. And then also looking into community organizations and or resources whose partnership could be beneficial for our pilot program.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Alan. Took a note.
Great.
Okay,
Now I think you can.
now we can adjourn. Thank you, everyone.
A motion to adjourn.
Yeah, and folks.
In a second.